Immortal Cultivation in the Cybernetic Milky Way. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 151. One attack failed. The patrol officer's spiritual support came at the right time, helping everyone resist the King Bug's mental attack, and finally giving Fenyi time to complete the annihilation wind-slashing technique. Nanling continued to clear the surrounding locusts. He found that the Gauss rifle he took out could still effectively kill ordinary locusts, as long as he attached a little wind control effect to each bullet. He could make each bullet fired to be able to avoid air resistance as much as possible, and have a certain wind-tearing effect. This greatly increased the lethality of the Gauss rifle, and even exceeded the performance of energy weapons. Nanling simply used it to carry out long-range attacks, and by the way, it was also a way for him to rest. The King Bug also wanted to run, but it was too bloated, and the breeding nest was too big. It could be said that it was crawling by its own strength. So dozens of locusts with larger heads surrounded it, supported it with their backs, and finally moved quickly. Nanling saw that it was just shooting with a gun, and had no intention of rushing forward. What a joke! Did the King Bug run away because he was afraid of him? If he rushed forward now, he would be dead. And he had no intention of reminding Fenyi. After all, he felt that Fenyi must be more anxious than him. Sure enough, when the king insect was about to run out of sight, he heard Fenyi behind him shouting, "Get out of the way!" Nanling quickly rolled to hide aside. Then Fenyi behind him had already raised his hands forward, and a terrible hurricane vortex shot out from between his two palms. This was a dark blue storm, and countless tiny wind blades were hidden in the storm, which pierced through with a rotating cutting force. There were also dark locusts along the way trying to resist. The moment they came into contact with this storm, their skin and flesh peeled off and became scattered fragments. The scene was extremely cruel. And this kind of power also opened Nanling's eyes, and he felt that it was worthy of being the signature skill of the Feng family in Fenyu. So what should the king insect do when facing this terrible wind technique? It screamed sharply, and countless dark locusts blocked it. But those dark locusts could not hinder the pace of this wind technique. As a last resort, the King Bug did something that Nanling had not expected. That is, it blocked its own breeding nest in front, or in other words, it hid its body behind the breeding nest. The next moment, the huge breeding nest was violently cut, and disgusting juice was thrown everywhere. There were actually some hatched insect eggs in the breeding nest, and many larvae became shields to block the knife and were directly torn apart. At this time, Nanling also discovered the characteristics of this wind technique, which is to use countless small wind blades as an attack method. This is an extremely powerful wind technique for single targets, but it is easy to be dispersed for multiple targets. Of course, under normal circumstances, this is nothing. After all, this annihilation wind-slashing technique is powerful enough, and there are enough small wind blades. But there are more nether locusts. The King Bug barely resisted this terrible wind technique with countless insect eggs and newly hatched larvae in the breeding nest, and then the surrounding large nether locusts quickly climbed onto the breeding nest and served as targets to share the damage of the annihilation wind-slashing technique. The storm stopped, and it was not able to completely penetrate the insect ball. Nanling knew that something was wrong when he saw this. Seeing Fenyi was about to fall, he could only return to her side to prevent the crazy locusts from attacking. Boom. 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 Long-range artillery support arrived again, this time landing very accurately near the insect ball, quickly breaking it up in a short time. The inspector's huge and vast divine consciousness immediately enveloped it, dispersing all the smoke from the explosion. Finally, the voice of the Wind Region Inspector rang in everyone's ears. "We can't find that trace of the King Bug, but it is definitely not dead. The mission has failed, you should withdraw quickly." Fenyi showed a distressed look at the time, and she insisted, "Let me look for it again, I will definitely find it." The inspector immediately rebuked. "What are you thinking about? The outer locusts have all gone to you, you must withdraw immediately. If you stay there at this time, it will only waste resources and kill more locusts. As the actual controller of this space station, you might as well start preparing for evacuation immediately. Your last chance has passed, don't be willful, as a child of the Feng family, you must take responsibility." The rebuke in the divine mind made Fenyi lose her mind, and she was not even qualified to argue in front of the inspectors around her. Because of the previous battle, this adult also made great efforts, and she even had to accept this favor. Perhaps seeing her being so coy, Nanling couldn't stand it anymore, so he said, "Okay, stop being so coy, things are not irreversible, let's go back and discuss it." Fen Yi's eyes lit up, and he immediately looked up at Nanling and said, "What else do you have in mind? Do you have any way to reposition the king bug?" Nanling shook her head and said, "Even if I can reposition the king bug, do you have the energy to do it again? Pull me into your command channel, I'll post my ideas in it, and you can judge for yourself." Fen Yi immediately pulled Nanling into the command channel, and then saw the maintenance structure diagram of the entire space station sent by Nanling, as well as the hundreds of points marked on this structure diagram. Fen Yi was stunned. She was not stupid, and just seeing this scene made her think of what Nanling wanted to do. Madame Nanji was already shocked and said, "According to your idea, this is to separate the entire lower city from the space station." The Wind Region Inspector was quite moved and said, "This is a good idea. You guys come back quickly. We will calculate the feasibility and the damage that will be caused to the middle and upper areas after such an action, as well as the plan for subsequent recovery." Although Nanling was not mentioned, the inspector's words gave people a sense of approval of Nanling. This was to directly pull him into the decision-making level to discuss the issue. Fen Yi did not feel anything wrong when seeing this, but felt relieved. And the solution given by Nanling became her last straw. To be honest, if this solution was proposed before this action, Fen Yi would definitely resist it. But now the action she insisted on has failed. Seeing that the king insect fled, she had to make a choice. As a result, Nanling brought her a completely feasible sacrifice, the small to protect the big plan, which made her feel completely different. To be honest, she even felt that if it were not for Nanling, she would have collapsed. And now, she has gathered her energy again and is ready to go back to discuss the feasibility of this plan, or rather, the specific implementation plan. Chapter 152 The Eldest Lady's Favor. The raiding team came back. Except for Fen Yi, who was well protected, one person died and 3 people including Nanling were injured. Nanling was hit on the shoulder by the warhead controlled by the king insect with mental power. Since then, the left shoulder has been very weak. It should be a bone injury. But he didn't have time to care about this now, but discussed the plan with the bigwigs nervously. In fact, this plan has been approved. In fact, when they returned, the data model had been completed, and it could almost accurately determine the damage caused to the space station when the plan was implemented. And what they considered was only the difference in the location and power of the explosion. Of course, this is all professional work done by professionals, and Nanling doesn't need to worry too much. Fen Yi just suddenly thought of something and immediately arranged the evacuation and resettlement of all residents in the lower area. If this happened in the past, it would definitely seem very abnormal, but now it can reflect Fen Yi's tenacity and intelligence. That is, she has realized that the future Qinyuan 06 will probably be mainly composed of these original residents of the lower area. Because the original residents of the middle and upper areas who have the ability to leave will never stay. Her next task will be to complete the reconstruction on the ruins, and the original residents of the lower area will be her only choice. This is really a wonderful thing. No one could have thought that Qinyuan 06 would eventually turn into this. But it is undeniable that Fen Yi saved her space station, and the people in the space station also saved their lives as much as possible, with only some property losses at most. The king insect was also severely damaged, especially the breeding nest was destroyed. Even if the king insect wanted to recover, it would take a long time, enough for everyone to carry out the task of cutting off the tail and surviving. Nanling was already satisfied with this result, so he resigned directly to Fen Yi after everything was agreed. He had to leave, and Mo was still waiting for him to go back on the ship. Fen Yi was very surprised by this, and her body even shook. She didn't say anything at the time. But when Nanling and Tai Long left the wartime command center and prepared to return to the Purple Iris, Fen Yi suddenly ran out and called Nanling. Tai Long was surprised for a moment, then he showed a coercive smile. He said, "I'll go back first, you guys talk slowly." Nanling felt very embarrassed at the time, thinking that Tai Long was completely unreliable. But facing Fen Yi's moist eyes, Nanling actually felt a little defeated. "Nanling, can you stay and help me?" Fen Yi begged. Nanling refused without any hesitation. "I'm a subordinate of Boss Fanny, and I'm also very grateful for Boss Fanny's care for me, so I have no intention of leaving her." Fen Yi was silent for a while, and suddenly said, if I'm willing to share everything I have with you. In this way, can you stay and help me?" This is interesting, and there are some meanings worth digging into, but because of Fen Yi's reserve, some things are not made very clear. Nanling understands that this lady is emotional again. After this period of getting along, Nanling is actually constantly analyzing and understanding Fenyi's character. He knows that this lady often does some inexplicable things when she is emotional, and it is difficult to guarantee whether she will regret it when she regains her sanity. Nanling still refused decisively. Ms. Fenyi, thank you for your invitation, but I have already signed a contract with Boss Fan. Fenyi didn't know what was in her mind, and it seemed that Nanling's refusal made her impulsive, and she said willfully, "But I need you, I like you." Nanling was stunned on the spot. At this time, he had no expression of joy at all, but was embarrassed to death. Because he had been opening the communication with his team, that is to say, he might be socially dead. But compared to the social dead later, he now needs to pass Fenyi's level more. This is a woman who is getting darker. Even if so many things have happened now, how can she stop getting darker easily? So he wanted to keep a distance from Fenyi, and never thought about fighting for a few decades less. In the end, he racked his brains and could only find the least hurtful excuse. "I'm sorry, Miss Fenyi, Actually, I already have someone I like, and she is waiting for me to go back. It's not that you are not good, but it's a pity that I already have someone I like." Nanling used this as an excuse. But is this really an excuse? Mo's somewhat angry voice came to his ears. "When you come back, you will be in trouble." She put herself into the situation. Nanling's expression froze, and then he showed a guilty expression. Fenyi then realized something and asked, "That person is connected to you?" Nanling smiled awkwardly. Then Fenyi covered his mouth and smiled and said, "You are scolded?" "Ha." She seemed cheerful and free and easy. In the end, she stopped talking and said, "What a pity." Then she turned around and left without any nostalgia. Nanling scratched his face and thought that he should return to the Purple Iris as soon as possible. The world outside was too dangerous, and he had to protect himself. So he hurried back to the ship and saw Talon in the corner with admiration, and Mo sitting next to him with a cold face, who seemed to be working seriously. Nanling came up and said, "Don't worry, I have sent that lady away." He felt that he was quite strange. Why was he so cautious? Mo said unhappily, "Can you stop using me as an excuse every time?" Nanling blinked, feeling a little aggrieved. Tai Long beside him gave a timely assist. "But Miss Mo, my brother Nanling didn't seem to say that the person he likes is you." Mo was stunned, and then she recalled that it seemed that Nanling really didn't mention this matter at all. He just said that he had someone he liked, which sounded like an excuse to reject Fenyi. Did she put herself into it? No. Mo's eyes condensed, and she looked at Nanling more sternly, and she was very sure in her heart. Blame him. She snorted coldly and said, "Tai Long, are you dissatisfied with me?" Tai Long was scared at the time. After all, she was a woman who was stronger than him, and she couldn't afford to offend her. And Mo looked at Nanling again, her eyes full of warnings. Nanling could only accept her fate and said, "I'm sorry, Sister Mo." Mo's face immediately relaxed, and her tone returned to cold and calm. She said, "I really can't do anything about you." She was satisfied that the crisis of her careless mistake and almost social death had passed. Nanling was very helpless about this, but who made her his creditor? Making his creditors feel happy physically and mentally is the basic quality of a debtor. However, Nanling's disaster was not over, because Fenyi did not give up getting him. She just changed her method. Chapter 153a. Major event that was hastily decided. Nanling had already confirmed that Fenyi had started to turn evil, and there was absolutely no mistake about that. Because he had not been able to get Nanling before, Fenyi had no moral integrity and went straight to Fan and I, trying to use the friendship between him and Fan and I to get his way. So, Mo and Nanling saw Fan and I start to speak in the cultivation discussion group. "Oh Guy, what on earth did you two do over there? Why did I suddenly receive a call from Fenman Man, that silly goose, and she wanted to bid for Xiao Nan's contract?" Nanling and Mo looked at each other, not expecting Fenyi to be able to do such a trick. Did he think this was a transfer? Mo immediately asked, "Did you agree?" Fan and I laughed and said, "How could I agree? I don't need her money. Since she followed Yu Chen home, she has resumed her pocket money. The most important thing is that she used the extreme method of self-destruction of the golden elixir as a way to break the deadlock between father and daughter, and Yu Chen also doted on Fan and I more because of his sense of indebtedness. The direct reaction was that her pocket money amount increased by a lot again." Then Nanling and Mo told Fan and I the story of what happened here. They didn't feel it when they experienced it, but now Fan and I were shocked when they told it. Fenman Man, that silly goose, is really useless. You fought for such a good opportunity for her, but she couldn't grasp it. She deserved to lose her space station. And Shannon, I didn't expect you to do so much for the silly goose. She must be very touched, right? Fan and I knew her friend very well. She even guessed Fenyi's mentality. In her continuous setbacks, she met someone who was smart enough to always help her. The feeling of being reliable in a critical moment is very easy to make people fall. Especially Fenyi is such an emotional person. At this time, Fan and I's expression when looking at Nanling changed a little. It became weird. As for Nanling, he said with a look of disgust. What's the use of being touched? She didn't give me money. Very good, one word revealed his true thoughts of resolutely leaving Fenyi and continuing to return to Fan and I's arms. Fenyi didn't give her money. After doing so many things for her, she didn't give him any benefits at all, so what's the point of talking about it? Nanling was afraid of being cheated of his labor and his body out of self-protection, so he decisively cut off and didn't let those sunk costs drag him down. This time it was Fanny and Mo's turn to look at each other remotely. They thought about it carefully. This is really Nanling's character. Fanny covered her stomach and felt that she was about to laugh. She was so happy in her heart. But at this moment, she was surprised and said, "Wait, that stupid goose is calling me again. I'll go pick it up and come back." As she said that, her screen disappeared. Mo looked at Nanling with a calm look at this time. She felt that he was very stable. She had the deepest understanding of Nanling's love for money. She also knew that as long as the money was in place, Nanling was the most trustworthy. Then after a while, Fanny came back with a strange expression on her face. She said, "This time Fenman Man seems to be deeply involved. She even came to ask me if I am the one Shannon likes." Nanling was stunned for a moment. Mo also laughed. Then Fanny said with a smile, "I told her not to be delusional. Besides, she knows that Shannon's bloodline has genes from both the Ge family and the Feng family. You two are not suitable in terms of blood relationship. But your blood relationship with her is still a little distant. I'm afraid that she still has improper thoughts. So I said that the one you like is actually Mo." She blinked at Mo and said, "Don't be angry, Mo. I will use your name to stop the guy's improper thoughts. We can't let her ruin our Shannon." Mo's face was a little ruddy. She said, "Fanny." It was just a shout, but there was not much reprimand in it. It could even be said that the meaning was ambiguous. Perhaps she had already realized that she wanted to shield the arrow for Nanling. Yes, Nanling and Fanny are actually quite close in terms of blood relationship. In addition, Fanny is noble, so it is definitely not appropriate to use her to shield the arrow. Li Ji has already decided to take the path of digital life and give up her human body. It is obviously unrealistic to do these things. So it seems that Mo is the only female friend around Nanling who can do such things. Mo just feels that she has a great responsibility. As a result, Fanny's brain circuit is not known for what, but she was inspired by this. While thinking, she said, "Speaking of which, it seems that it would be a good idea if you two get married outside." Nanling was shocked. Of course, shock was his first reaction, and the second reaction was to quickly hide the joy in his heart. Marrying Mo, Mo glared at him unhappily and said, "Put away your smile first." Nanling rubbed his face quickly. Damn it, he couldn't restrain his expression in this data space. Mo had no time to pay attention to Nanling. She just looked at Fanny seriously and said, "Fanny, why do you say that suddenly?" Fanny said, "Aren't you unable to come back because of the shameless pursuit of my uncle? But if you already have a husband, then my uncle will have no reason to bother you anymore. That person just wants to control your family by getting you and separate your family from me and my father. Asking to marry you is just a means and not a necessity. As long as we cut off this way, they will naturally find another way, and you can come back to me then." Mo came to his senses after hearing this and said, "So this is your plan? If it's just a fake couple, it's not impossible." Nanling suddenly resisted after hearing this and said, "But in this way, it may not be good for Mo's reputation. What if she meets someone she really likes in the future?" Fanny felt that her idea was too casual when she heard it, so she said, "Sorry, I didn't think of this." "I'm sorry, Mo." Mo said with a complicated expression, "To be honest, I didn't think of this myself. I always felt that I would always be by your side, Fanny." More importantly, she knew that Nanling was really thinking about her seriously, not just being selfish. In front of Mo, Nanling never concealed his love, which made Mo feel that Nanling would be the happiest one if he really decided like this. But he was the first to refuse, and he refused from his own standpoint. She looked at Nanling helplessly and said, "Okay, I know you feel uncomfortable pretending, right? I understand your feelings, and I will think about this carefully." Nanling frowned and said that he was not pretending. But he thought about it and felt that he was too wishful. Although it is true that he likes Mo very much, the main thing is that if that is the case, wouldn't he be able to owe money and not pay it back? But his marriage is destined to exist in name only. After all, his first priority now is cultivation, and to cultivate, he must first abstain from sex. A wife or something is just something to look at and satisfy vanity, and there is no practical significance. But he and Mo may really be in sync to some extent. Mo glanced at him and suddenly said calmly, "I think this can be done this way. Can you help us register in the ancient domain, Fanny?" Fanny thought that this was just a whim and was about to give up, but who knew that Mo suddenly agreed. She and Nanling looked at Mo in shock and asked, "Why?" Mo smiled. "It's because I had some feelings when I was studying the physical power of essence with Xion and before. I think there are still too many things worth exploring in the way of cultivation. I don't want to be held back by such worldly things. Xion is also a person who is devoted to the Tao. Why don't we make an appointment and walk on this road together?" Nanling was at a loss. He never thought that the lifelong event that was closely related to him would be decided so hastily. Chapter 154. You'll get used to it slowly. Nanling was actually still happy. They were still married on the surface. They were married. They had the status first. When they didn't have to abstain from sex anymore, it would be a natural thing. Anyway, he was quite happy. Even if it was really hasty. That's enough. We're just faking it. Do you know what faking it means? Mo's eyebrows were about to stand up. She was already regretting agreeing to Fanny's sudden idea. Nanling nodded with a smile and said, "I know, I will call you dear lady outside, and good sister in private." Mo had no expression on her face. She felt that Nanling seemed to understand all the meanings of faking it, but it was all distorted. She bit her teeth and said, "Remove all those messy prefixes." Nanling followed suit. "Okay sister." Mo still felt very strange. She always felt that something was wrong. Being called sister by Nanling in such an intimate tone, she felt that goosebumps were about to fall all over her body, and she was also very embarrassed. But she had to endure it. After all, this was the path she chose. Well, she had regretted it, and even thought about whether to regret it every day. But unfortunately, Fanny acted too quickly, and she had already added a column of husband Nanling in her identity information in the ancient domain. It was useless for her to regret, because the eldest lady she was loyal to seemed to like seeing this situation. Helplessly, she could only drag Nanling to work to shut him up. "Sister, do you think there is something wrong with this program?" "Sister, I don't understand this part. How do you think it should be installed?" "Sister, can you help me explain the drawings of the Welling wingsuit? It's too complicated." "Sister," Mo couldn't stand it anymore. She covered her head and shouted, "Shut up, you weren't so stupid before." Nanling smiled and didn't say anything. After all, love makes people stupid. But there was an unexpected gain, that is, Mo quickly adapted to this corny tone and corny name, just feeling a little annoyed. Of course, Nanling also understood the principle that too much is as bad as too little. He quickly recovered his normal work efficiency, which made the originally irritable Mo feel much better. She felt that as long as Nanling was normal, the years would be peaceful. Of course, the slightly corny names were no longer so important. He could call her whatever he wanted. The Purple Iris was finally able to sail into space during the two people's adjustments. However, it was still temporarily unable to travel far, and they still needed to conduct a relatively long-term debugging. After all, many systems had been added, and its original intelligence system seemed to be somewhat unmatched. By the way, this was also waiting for Mrs. Nanji to come back. She really couldn't let go of her student, so she was ready to help Fengyi one last time. But no matter how much she couldn't let go, Mrs. Nanji still boarded the Purple Iris 5 days later. At this time, her expression was still calm and lazy, with a gentle smile. But Nanling felt that this smile was full of alienation, so he asked, "What's wrong, are you in a bad mood?" Madame Nanji looked at him and said casually, "Is it so obvious?" Nanling said, "Well, anyway, I felt that you were in a bad mood." Madame Nanji shook her head and said, "I just didn't expect that. I had tried my best to arrange everything for her, but when I said goodbye to her, she still spoke ill of me and regarded me as a traitor." Nanling said with a serious expression, "This is probably human nature." Madame Nanji smiled, "I don't need your comfort. I know Fengyi better than you." Mo also interrupted at this time. She is such a person. She thinks it is natural for others to help her, but she doesn't need to pay the corresponding price. Very selfish, but it is also a problem that many people have. Madame Nanji saw Mo talking, and suddenly she smiled extremely gently. She came to Mo and said with a smile, "By the way, I haven't congratulated you on your happy wedding yet." Mo was embarrassed for a moment. She never expected that Madame Nanji would point this out at this time. She said, "How did you know?" Madame Nanji said, "Because Fengyi has cursed you to me many times, thinking that you were a robber." She threatened, "Why, shouldn't I know?" Mo said helplessly, "This is just a temporary measure. Shonen and I are like-minded friends. It just so happens that I am also facing some troubles in this regard, so we can help each other. This is called mutual shielding." Madame Nanji was still full of smiles. She said, "Well, no matter how you discussed it, since you are married, shouldn't you change to a more formal name? I don't care how you call me in your own room, but it should be a little bit formal outside." Mo was surprised. Did Madame Nanji and Nanling have an agreement? Why did he always embarrass her in such a place? Nanling felt sorry for his wife, so he said, "It doesn't matter. This is not a formal social occasion. It's considered private." Madame Nanji looked at Nanling with some regret at the time, and then angrily ignored him. Nanling was completely confused. Mo was relieved. She said, "It's a good thing you helped me, but what's going on with Madame Nanji?" Nanling realized something belatedly. He whispered to Mo, "Maybe she put herself in the role of my mother." He didn't hide anything from Mo. He told her all his guesses, which showed that there were no secrets between husband and wife. Mo was shocked. She knew Nanling's identity. So she glanced at Madame Nanji and asked curiously, "Are you related to her?" Nanling shrugged and said, "Who knows? Anyway, she made me, and I survived in her arms. To be honest, I have no objection to her being my mother, but maybe everyone is embarrassed to say it out loud." Mo was quite surprised to hear this, and suddenly felt distressed for Nanling. She knew that Nanling was an artificial person without a father or a mother, and she felt that it was not easy for Nanling to grow up to be so cheerful and intelligent. She said, "Then we should respect her like a mother in the future." Nanling looked over and asked in surprise, "Why?" Mo blushed slightly, then turned around and said, "Although we are just a fake couple, we should not fall behind in the social relationships we should have." Nanling said, "Well, then when we return to the ancient domain, I will also go to meet your parents." Mo felt so embarrassed, but she did not refuse. She gritted her teeth and agreed, only to feel that this matter was becoming more and more troublesome. But what else can she do? She found that she could only choose to accept this. It's just regretful, after all, she was just careless at the time, and she didn't expect that she would encounter so many challenges in the future. Chapter 155 Love Your Own Husband. The Purple Iris set sail, a bit like running away. Chinyuano 6 didn't leave many good memories for everyone, but Nanling is in a good mood every day. Of course, the unexpected end of single social relationships is one thing, and after they left Chinyuano 6, they were finally able to take out the hidden parts of the Welling wingsuit for debugging and assembly. As a man, the attraction of this Welling wingsuit has undoubtedly exceeded that of a newlywed wife. Nanling was completely immersed in the wingsuit assembly and completely forgot that he had a creditor wife. Mo originally thought that Nanling was annoying because he always appeared beside her recently and always looked at her with a silly smile, but now she suddenly felt empty. This man is too fickle, he even doesn't want his wife when he encounters something he is interested in. Mo was very angry, but she couldn't get angry because she asked Nanling to go out and play. She could only sort out her breath and let the purple iris float in the space while continuing her debugging work. There are not only 4 people on the entire Purple Iris, there are also some crew members, all of whom are the subordinates of the Dai-Tin organization developed in Chinyuano 6. This time Chinyuano 6 hit the bottom all of a sudden, so some of the people developed by Dai-Tin are also preparing to evacuate. As a result, these people who were originally Dai-Tin worked with Mo for a period of time. While being ordered around by her, they were gradually won over by her. They originally only listened to the orders of Talon, the actual person in charge, but now they also listen to Mo's orders, and they are extremely smooth. Talon was sidelined like this. He was speechless and wanted to complain to Lady Nanji. As a result, Lady Nanji, whom he followed, not only did not stand up for him, but also praised Mo's talents. Talon was very uncomfortable, so love will disappear, right? Just when Nanling assembled the first whaling wingsuit, Mo suddenly called him out of the hangar. The spacecraft has been debugged almost, and we're about to set off. But before that, do you want to see some big fireworks? Nanling looked at the world outside the porthole next to her unexpectedly. That was the distant view of Chinyuan 06. Chinyuan 06 was very big, but now it was just a palm-sized figure in Nanling's eyes. They had been sailing and debugging these days, and unknowingly had moved away from the space station. At this moment, Nanling saw a circle of fine sparks suddenly appearing around the space station. Then, part of the space station was silently separated from the main body. Nanling knew that this was the lower area of the separation. They looked here and everything happened quietly, but what was actually happening on the space station? Nanling couldn't imagine it, but she felt that Fengyi must be in a bad mood at this time. But so what, no one cares about what she thinks now. To be honest, Nanling thought that if she had agreed to let Fengyi stay, maybe with his help she would not fall into darkness. But what about his life in that case? He didn't want to tie his life to this woman, not to mention that they didn't have much friendship. Even in Nanling's judgment, Fengyi was a contradictory existence with both sensibility and rationality. When sensibility prevailed, he might pay much attention to him, but what if her rationality prevailed? She would probably feel unhappy because she seemed too incompetent in front of Nanling, and she would regard Nanling as a thorn in her side. Therefore, accepting Fengyi's invitation was never an option for Nanling to consider, so he could leisurely watch the big fireworks released at Dust Edge 06 side by side with his good sister. The detached part of the space station was quickly thrown behind, and then the main guns of the Bayou Legion fleet locked in stored energy. The next moment, all the main guns of the starships of the Bayou 6th Fleet fired together, and launched a mighty concentrated fire on the separated space station. The separated part of the space station was melted in the vast energy beam in front of Nanling. Then a piece of colorful dust exploded in the boundless void. It was indeed a beautiful firework. Mo asked softly, then the king worm should have been solved, right? Nanling said, I don't know about that. In theory, Miss Fengyi had already closed all the interlaid channels before separating this part of the space station. The king worm should still be in the lower module of that part of the space. It should not be able to escape from such an attack. Mo shook his head and said, okay, anyway, this is not something we can consider. We are no longer welcome here. Nanling was speechless after hearing this. He asked, speaking of which, isn't Boss Fanna still doing business with Miss Fengyi? Is this okay? Mo sighed and said, who knows? It would be good if Fanna can get back the money she lent to Miss Fengyi. By the way, you have been busy in the hangar recently. Have you seen the gift I prepared for you? Nanling blinked and said, gift. Mo looked at him with amusement and said, it's in the box at the No. 3 station. Didn't you open it and take a look? Nanling was surprised and ran to the hangar. Mo walked behind him with a gentle smile on her face. She didn't seem to be in a hurry. But before he could walk to the hangar, Nanling rushed back. He couldn't help but hug Mo, looking very happy. Mo put her hands on her chest and barely kept some distance, then said unhappily, you restrain yourself. Nanling quickly let go of Mo, then said embarrassedly but still with a smile on her face, that's pure faith. A gift for me? Mo nodded and said, I noticed that your hurricane has a lot of wear and tear in this battle. It's too troublesome to take care of it, so I just used the remaining credits to exchange for this combat armor for you. At this time, Nanling just felt that the fragrant soft rice fed to his mouth was really delicious. But she still said embarrassedly, but isn't that public money belonging to the Zhuoxia? It's not good to buy equipment for me directly. Mo said, you'll listen to Fanny's request to help Miss Fengyi. There is no reason to make so much effort without reward. This pure color faith is the reward for your outstanding performance this time. She knew Nanling too well, and knew too well how to make him unable to refuse. And she was really a little angry. Her husband did so many things for Fengyi, that woman, and in the end he didn't get any reward. Okay, she will feel sorry for her husband. You don't want to pay, right? Then she will pay. Anyway, the hurricane armor is too ordinary, and how can it be worn out in tatters? Chapter 156 Can't help loving pure color faith. The combat armor that Nanling had been struggling with for a long time but had not finally started to make, now appeared in front of him. Looking at this graceful figure, this smooth and white shell, and the elegant and advanced appearance design, Nanling loved it. Of course, he loved his wife, Mo, more. At this moment, he felt that his heart was hit hard by Mo, and there was no room for anything else. As long as you like it. Mo smiled with satisfaction. She knew that Nanling would like this, so she forgave him for his previous rudeness. To be honest, the change of identity still made her mentality different. Things that she might not care about before now became involuntarily concerned about. Don't you want to try it on? Nanling couldn't wait to open the permissions of Pure Color Faith and then took control of it. Then Pure Color Faith seemed to come alive, stood up and walked in front of Nanling, then turned around and opened the internal cabin from the back, revealing the wearing space. Nanling walked up and made his body fit perfectly with the cabin opened by Pure Color Faith. Then the intelligence core completely took over the system of this armor, and the data stream flashed in front of Nanling's eyes. In the past, Nanling felt dizzy when facing these data streams, but now he can read and understand these data quickly. This is not only the improvement of his knowledge, but more importantly, the improvement of his brain thinking ability. After quickly becoming familiar with the various data of Pure Color Faith, he said with emotion, "After all, it is a private order level weapon. It is close-fitting and comfortable to wear." Mo smiled and said, "In terms of grade, Pure Color Faith is just a mid-range armor. It is just because it has a lot of room for modification and is too classic that it has become an entry-level private order model. But it is not a real high-end armor. I still have to tailor it for you when I have the chance in the future." Nanling's expression changed and said, "No, the current Pure Color Faith is already very good. I can't take your things anymore. Even if I need it, I will earn it myself." Mo crossed his arms and liked to see Nanling's independent and self-reliant look. The corners of her mouth twitched slightly, and then she said, "Okay, we are going to make a hyperspace jump. This is the first hyperspace flight of the Purple Iris. For safety, let's find a place to stay." Nanling nodded repeatedly, and the core force simply came to the bridge to gather, and then sat down on the chairs on the bridge to stay. "How is it? Are you satisfied with your gift?" As soon as they sat down, Mrs. Nanji spoke again in a coercive way. Nanling looked over speechlessly and asked, "You know?" Mrs. Nanji said, "Of course I know, otherwise how do you think Mo would know that you were obsessed with this style?" Nanling was speechless, and he said, "You are too obsessed with me, aren't you?" Mrs. Nanji was surprised for a moment, and then asked seriously, "Am I going too far?" Nanling was stunned, and finally shook his head and didn't respond. Seeing this, Mrs. Nanji also hesitated to speak. Mo really couldn't stand this awkward state, she said. "We have entered the gravitational orbit of the neighboring star and are ready to enter hyperspace flight." Everyone quickly gathered their thoughts. The next moment, everyone entered the hyperspace flight state. Nanling felt confused for a moment, and then he regained consciousness. He was about to sink his consciousness into his intelligence core to contact Mo, and suddenly realized that something was wrong. He found that he didn't seem to feel so uncomfortable in this hyperspace state. Previously, he could clearly feel that his physical senses had so many discomforts in hyperspace flight, but now he found that he was no longer so uncomfortable. What's going on? He looked at the strange light in front of him with some surprise, and after a moment, he felt tired again. He quickly stopped paying attention to this hyperspace and sank his consciousness into the intelligence core. Understand? Just a moment ago, he understood why. This is because his brain's thinking ability has improved and can withstand more information flow impact. The reason why he felt uncomfortable before was because his brain couldn't withstand the impact of the information flow, but now that his thinking ability has improved, he can hold on for a while longer. He couldn't help but start to speculate whether he would be able to assume physical activities in hyperspace in the future. It should be possible. And if he can ensure the activity of his physical body in hyperspace, does that mean he can travel in hyperspace directly in his physical body in the future? Nanling thought of so many things at once, and then he realized that he was pulled into a new group. Ziyuanhua's family. This group name, Nanling suspected that it was given by Madame Namji. This is also a data space that takes up a lot of memory. Sure enough, after entering, he saw Madame Nanji and Mo. Another unimportant person was obviously not qualified to enter this group. When Lady Nanji saw Nanling coming in, she immediately smiled with relief and said, "Sure enough, you can also maintain your thinking ability in hyperspace." Speaking of which, the ability to think in hyperspace is generally only possessed by the 9th or 10th level of the Foundation building period. You must not have reached that level now, right? Nanling nodded and said, "It's only the 4th level of the Foundation building period." Lady Nanji said, "You are really a little genius." This kind of doting praise really made Nanling a little overwhelmed, so he said, "Let's not talk about this. This hyperspace flight is only 4 hours. Is this just an experiment or something else?" Lady Nanji said, "There is a clue there. It is 2.1 light-years away from the Chenyuan 06 space station. It is a star system with nothing special. No matter how nothing special it is, according to my calculations, this star system should be on the cruise trajectory of the Changshan Xianzhou back then, so I want to go to that star system to verify it. Nanling became interested all of a sudden. Then Lady Nanji showed him a lot of information. This information was very complicated, all of which were collected and deduced by Lady Nanji over the years. After Nanling summarized this information, especially with the intelligence he got from Chen, he came up with 11 intersecting routes. These are all possible routes for the Nanji Changshan, and 8 of them intersect in that star system, which is obviously a very important place. Madame Nanji said, the main reason is that this star system is not far from Chenyuan 06. If the Changshan Xianzhou needs to stop for supplies, then the most likely place is to replenish materials here. At this time, Mo said, is there a record of the gravity detection of the space station 18 years ago? If there is that, it can be confirmed. Madame Nanji said, I checked, and the relevant information has been deleted. Nanling pondered. It should be that the Changshan Xianzhou has a special identification number that can avoid the conventional detection of the wind domain and the ancient domain. It's a pity that Uncle Gyu can't get this identification number, otherwise we can save a lot of trouble. Madame Nanji said, it's enough now, it just takes more time to verify. Chapter 157 What is Unit, -0. 4 days later, everyone came to this seemingly ordinary star system. A red star of moderate size, and 2 gaseous planets of ordinary mass revolving around it. This star system does not have any rocky planets in the habitable zone, only a dozen satellites orbiting 2 gaseous planets. It can be seen that the matter of this star system was not very sufficient at the beginning of its formation. Nanling observed this place on the bridge, and then began to use various detection devices to conduct a full-scale exploration of this star system. Everyone began to work tacitly, mainly because the AI on this ship was not as smart and comprehensive as Xiaoxia on the Zhuoxia, so many things needed manual operation. Even the summary of some information still needed the operator to provide ideas. At this time, Nanlin, Lady Nanji and Mo on the bridge were all doing this kind of work, only Talon looked bored. Some people can't do some things even with the assistance of top-level equipment. Originally, Talon followed Lady Nanji, and he was accustomed to this kind of thing. But now he saw that the 2 newcomers actually cooperated so well with Lady Nanji, he couldn't help but feel a strong sense of crisis. Would he be abandoned as cannon fodder? At this time, Nanlin, as the captain, finally summarized the information from many parties and came to the conclusion. He breathed a sigh of relief and said, okay, the intelligence work is done, and the next step is to take action. Talon immediately raised his hand and said, if we want to take action, let me lead the team. He had to do something, otherwise he would be uneasy. Lady Nanji said, of course you go, hurry up, the main thing is that these 5 locations are suspicious, you go and explore. Talon got the information and immediately went there excitedly. Madame Nanji looked at Nanling and Mo and said, today, I have you 2 working with me. I feel that this boring job can be so efficient and simple. It's a pity that the smart people in this world always have their own ideas, and I can only use those idiots to run errands for me. Mo bit her lip lightly, and then said, indeed, it was only after I met Xion that I felt for the first time how comfortable it is to have a qualified helper. Nanling smiled and said nothing. He had long fallen under the sugar-coated bullets of System O. The 3 of them flattered each other, while Talon led his team to run between those locations. Nanling saw that he was still using the space fighter, so he said, it seems that using space fighters for reconnaissance and exploration at this distance is indeed a bit inconvenient. I just assembled a set of Welling Wingsut, so I will send it to Talon. Mo said in surprise, you like Wingsuts very much, why don't you use the first one yourself? Nanling said a little embarrassedly, after all, this Welling Wingsut is the first time I assemble it. I'm not very skilled. There may be problems in some places after several mistakes. But there are no replacement parts, Mo. ... Lady Nanji. ... She hesitated for a moment, then opened the communication and said, Talon, Welling Wingsut no. Naught is ready. If you need it, I can give it to you first. Talon suddenly became happy, and he said, please give it to me. He seemed impatient, after all, this is a man's speed bump. Lady Nanji nodded and said, okay, I will send it to you right away. After the voice fell, she nodded to Nanlin, which meant, this matter is settled. Nanlin asked, isn't this inappropriate? Madame Nanji said nonchalantly, I have made it clear. He chose it himself. I can't do anything about it. Nanling's face was full of question marks. How could it be made clear? Mo, on the other hand, had come to her senses. She said, in the field of cutting-edge manufacturing, we usually call the verification machine of a new product unit naught. The purpose of its existence is to verify the technology. It is almost inevitable that there will be many defects. Nanling felt guilty at the time. Was Talon cheated because he had no experience? He had no experience in this area either. Fortunately, the two women loved him and he was not cheated. He secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Then Mo asked again, have you mastered the making of the wingsuit now? Nanling said, after disassembling and installing the naught unit several times, I'm already completely familiar with the Welling wingsuit. In fact, if I am given a little more time and the necessary equipment, it will be no problem for me to make a Welling wingsuit myself. Mo said, that's good, let's go, I will go to the hangar with you, and you can also teach me how to do it. Let's assemble the remaining Welling wingsuits together for emergency use. Nanling nodded, and they got up and went to the hangar together, feeling quite as if no one was around. The ignored Lady Nanji looked constipated, and this feeling of being ignored was really not pleasant. Smelly boy. She was somewhat helpless and angrily whispered, and then she couldn't help laughing. As for whether Tai Long would have any problems using the Welling wingsuit, naught. Who cares? Bang. With a light sound, the Welling wingsuit on the transmitter position in the hangar was launched. Talon had been waiting in space wearing the Iron Rhino armor. He was looking forward to the Welling wingsuit being loaded onto him. To be honest, he had never used this kind of special equipment for space combat before, but he just thought it was a man's romance, and he was looking forward to it. Then he saw the Welling wingsuit flying towards him rapidly under the control of the automatic system. It was a device like a small aircraft, with two square thrusters close together and rushing towards him. He saw that his intelligence core had been connected to the system of the wingsuit, so he turned his back with expectation and prepared to welcome the Welling wingsuit to be loaded onto his body. However, dang, the Welling wingsuit hit Talon's back directly, making him spin like a ball and hit an asteroid orbiting a huge gas planet. Everyone even saw the dust flying high when it hit the asteroid. What's going on? Talon's somewhat weak voice appeared in the communication. Nanling immediately pondered upon seeing this. It seems that the control system of Unit Naught is not accurate enough. This is where adjustments are needed. This serious statement was definitely a bluff. Tai Long seemed to understand something, and he said, I became the test pilot of this Welling wingsuit. Lady Nanji said cheerfully, then I'll have to trouble you to do more tests. The more you test, the more defects we can find, which will facilitate subsequent adjustments. It is foreseeable that Tai Long would have a big to face at this time. He asked, how could this be? Is the Welling wingsuit already a mature equipment? Nanling said, it is mature, but I am not familiar with it. Don't worry, I'll just debug it a little more. Nanling felt that he had also learned bad things. Chapter 158 Clues. While Talon was using the often malfunctioning Welling wingsuit for his mission, Nanling and Mo finally assembled the other three wingsuits. To be honest, this Welling wingsuit is really too powerful. After finishing his work, Nanling couldn't wait to put on his new clothes pure white faith, and then loaded the Welling wingsuit. The wingsuit is normally two rectangular strips close together, but when it is loaded on Nanling's back, it unfolds in an inverted V shape, looking like the flying wing of a fighter plane. And the inside of the inverted V of the wingsuit is a row of small jets, which are for the convenience of folding in space and in the atmosphere. But at the end of the wingsuit are two large jets. Those are the main propulsion ports used for long-range combat or accelerated pursuit. The dual-core system allows the wingsuit to add a shield to the combat armor and a stronger spiritual power stimulation ability, which are important elements that can make the cultivator more powerful in space combat. In addition, the two wings have weapon slots with space folding functions on the outer side, allowing users to equip themselves with powerful weapons they need. Nanling chose a high-yield energy ray gun, which is used for long-range combat outside the atmosphere. In the other weapon slot, he placed a self-modified energy shotgun, which will be a powerful weapon for medium and short distances. As for being completely close, he can only rely on his spiritual gun, the Collapse. In fact, Nanling does not like to fight with the Collapse, because it means that his enemy is very close to him, which makes him feel insecure. Talon was stumbling and exploring, while Nanling had already ejected from the hangar in the Welling wingsuit for flight testing. The two wings spread out at an obtuse angle behind him, which is the normal combat cruise mode. In this mode, his flying movements are extremely fast and agile, and the best thing is that it can be superimposed with Nanling's flying skills, which can have a brand new display. He had a lot of fun, and he looked like he had never seen the world. The two women on the boat looked at this scene with a smile, as if they were looking at a silly son. Nanling was indeed unsophisticated. This was the first wingsuit in his life, so of course he would find it fun. But in fact, the origin of Lady Nanji is mysterious. Just talking about Mo, she has a higher-end exclusive wingsuit, but she left it in the ancient domain and didn't bring it out. Nanling played for a while, and saw Talon coming back with a dusty face. The two met in the void. Talon was hesitant to speak, as if he had suffered a lot of grievances. Indeed, he was now dusty and looked very bad. Nanling stepped forward and patted his shoulder and said, "Don't worry, it's just some minor technical problems. When we have the parts, I will help you adjust it. It will be solved soon." Talon's expression was slightly better, and then he said, "Take me back, I have some intelligence to report." Nanling asked, "Why don't you go back by yourself?" Talon said, "My wingsuit can't be accurately calibrated. I'm afraid that if I fly by myself, I will crash into the jet nozzle of the spacecraft engine." Nanling looked at Talon and felt that he was really pitiful. After all, this was all his fault, but who made Talon unsophisticated and couldn't even hear the meaning of Unit 0? Nanling helped Tai Long back to the purple iris. At this time, Lady Nanji and Mo were waiting for them in the hangar. Tai Long took out a broken part and said, "I found this on an asteroid. It can be judged that someone has repaired a piece of equipment and replaced parts on that asteroid." Lady Nanji said elegantly, "I asked you to go there because there are signs of suspected material collection there. What do you think about this?" Tai Long said, "Someone must have engaged in large-scale collection there. We have measured the asteroid. From various signs, it is shown that the asteroid should have an iron core, but now that core has been hollowed out." Mo, who had been silent just now, suddenly stretched out his hand and projected many pictures in front of him. He said, "The original shape of this part fragment has been determined, and these are the equipment that will use this part. Basically, they are some high-power special mining equipment, which are quite sophisticated and cutting-edge facilities." Lady Nanji was slightly surprised, and then looked at Mo and smiled warmly. There is no doubt that she also felt how comfortable it was to have Mo by her side to assist. She said, "That's great. It's almost certain that the existence that has stayed here is the immortal boat of immortality." Nanling hesitated and pondered for a while and said, "Could it be a fleet of looters? For example, the Death Star pirates?" Mo nodded when he heard this, and obviously thought it was a very likely event. Madame Nanji pondered for a moment, and countless light spots flashed in front of her eyes, indicating that she was searching for information. Then she raised her lips slightly and said, "You can rest assured about this. From 3 years ago to 100 years ago, the Death Star pirates were active in the Star Federation. The Star Federation is tens of thousands of light years away from the Wind region, and it takes 2 or 3 years to come here once. The collection traces here can be inferred to be left 50 years ago. What's more, because of the strength of the White Feather Core in the Wind region, there has been no decent looter fleet around for a long time, and the possibility that the looters left this thing can be ruled out." Nanling searched for the equipment information projected by Mo while listening, and then agreed with Madame Nanji's judgment. Because these equipment are very advanced and valuable, they are definitely not affordable for ordinary looters. The Death Star pirates don't operate in this area, so it's impossible that they were left behind by the looters. The other possibilities are the regular fleet, large merchant ships, and the hunting ships of the young masters and young ladies. However, if these three want to replenish materials, they can sail a little further to Chunyuan 06 for supplies. There is really no need to collect materials here. After Nanling figured it out, he nodded and said, "Those who need such large-scale collection must be super-large starships or fleets. Such a level of existence appears around the border of the Wind region. The White Feather Core cannot fail to pay attention to it. But Chunyuan 06 has no records of this. Only the extremely powerful Antarctic Immortal can do this." Madame Nanji nodded slowly, and then projected the possible routes of the Antarctic Immortal that she had summarized. However, this time, only 8 routes that would pass through here were projected. She said, "Now, we still have 8 routes to confirm." Mo said, "Are there any other screening conditions?" Madame Nanji shook her head and said, "No, the route of the Changshan Xianzhao was very hidden, at least the screening point near Chunyuan 06 is here. Another way is to use the information provided by your family master to screen in the ancient domain. But it will take half a year to go back and forth, so it is better to try these 8 routes bit by bit." That's right, when the Nanji Changshan had an accident, even if it was cruising on a fixed route, it must have been close to the Wind domain. They searched one by one, which was better than mobilizing a large number of troops to run back and forth to the ancient domain. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 159. The boring exploration begins. The Purple Iris entered hyperspace flight preparations. They will use the gravity bow of a gas planet to launch themselves into hyperspace and confirm that first route. The cruising speed of the Antarctic Chang'an reached an astonishing 1/10 of the speed of light. This is also that data that Nanling got from Gichen. Now that the Antarctic Chang'an has been cruising for 18 years, it should appear somewhere 1.8 light years away from the accident site. Although the location of the accident of the Antarctic Chang'an cannot be fully known, a range can be barely delineated through the navigation log of the escape ship that seems to have been deleted cleanly. So although it is said to be 8 routes, it is actually a range of 4 light years. There are many possibilities, and it may take several months to try. After all, no one can be sure whether the Antarctic Chang'an has been cruising at 1/10 of the speed of light for 18 years, and whether it has been captured by the gravity of a star and become a satellite of a star or planet. No one said anything more. In short, they randomly selected a target and prepared to make a hyperspace jump. To be honest, the intensity of this work is a bit high, but there is no way. Mrs. Nanji is obviously getting more and more impatient. Nanling himself is not very anxious. After all, the past is not of much value to him. But he feels that Mo is more anxious than him, and is looking forward to finding his own past, or finding out his own origins. He himself is completely pushed by the two women. This time the hyperspace flight on the route did not last long, and it was over in less than 2 hours. Here is an empty void, and there is nothing around. Nanling took a curious look, turned on various instruments for detection, and then he secretly controlled an auxiliary robot in the hangar through his intelligence core. The auxiliary robot is also humanoid, and its eyes lit up red, and then sneaked to the material warehouse. This material warehouse is much smaller than the Zeudoxia, and the stored materials are much less, but the necessary living materials are not sloppy at all. The robot quickly took out the squeezed icky juice from the warehouse. This is the most suitable juice for cheering up that he found after many attempts. Then, the robot brought a bottle of icky juice to the bridge. Nanling saw that everyone was busy, so he secretly ran over to open the door and took the bottle of juice. Then he opened the bottle cap and injected carbon dioxide into it. Then he poured himself a cup, and then, go hectares, it was refreshing. Then he looked around with a guilty conscience, and saw Mrs. Nanji holding her chin and looking at him helplessly, while Mo continued to work without raising her head. Mrs. Nanji said, "I didn't expect you to like this old-fashioned drink. This is not a good habit." Nanling said, unconvinced. "Why is it bad?" Mrs. Nanji said, "Aren't you afraid that you can't help burping and leave a bad impression on people?" Nanling thought for a while, and then asked back, "But who should I leave a good impression on?" This is really a good question, which made Mrs. Nanji stunned for a moment, and then subconsciously looked at Mo. Mo still didn't raise her head, and she said, "Pour me a cup too." Nanling immediately became happy. This kind of happiness of sharing your favorite things with close people is so wonderful. Mo took a sip, sipped it and said, "Okay, juice is quite suitable for this kind of drinking, but it would be better with ice cubes." Nanling was stunned when he heard this, then searched in his database and said, "Well, there is cold wind technique, I can learn it to make ice." Mo looked at him speechlessly and said, "You want to learn this unpopular wind technique again?" Nanling said, "How can such a useful wind technique be unpopular?" Mo said, "It's just a wind technique used to blow cold wind to create local rapid cooling, how can it be useful?" Nanling said, "Cool down when it's hot, and make ice yourself when you want to drink ice, how great is that?" Mo said helplessly, "All of what you said can be achieved by scientific and technological means." Nanling said, "I can achieve it with my own ability, so I don't need to borrow external objects." As he said that, he had already loaded this wind technique and started to learn it. Mo looked at her husband, who owed her another sum of money because of this, and felt extremely helpless. At this time, Madame Nanji pointedly said, "It's a good thing for a man to have his own ideas sometimes. You don't have to make him listen to you in everything." Without saying anything, Mo threw the details of Nanling's debts in front of Madame Nanji. Madame Nanji was stunned at the time, and then she felt angry at her for not fighting back. She said, "You have suffered a lot. You must be more careful about him in the future and don't let him spend money so lavishly." In Madame Nanji's eyes, Mo was clearly being cheated by a deadbeat, because Nanling owed her too much money, so she could only collect debts personally by getting married. Of course, Nanling noticed the situation of the two people over there, and he said nonchalantly, "What are you afraid of? When I become an immortal in the future, it will be easy to pay back this money." Mo smiled helplessly and said, "Okay, just consider it as my initial investment in you, Xiaonangxian." Nanling suddenly felt a little embarrassed, as if she was calling him a soft-rice immortal. He immediately returned to his seat and pretended to operate seriously. Mo and Madame Nanji looked at each other, both showing a smile. Nanlin, who has such a personality, is really cute. However, this is just a small episode in life. This kind of exploration along the preset route is really boring. In the following days, they were mostly dull. Fortunately, with their operation, the AI of Ziyuanhua was trained, so that it could operate and calculate on behalf of everyone. Only people needed to be arranged on duty on the bridge. Nanling and Mo continued their physical exercises to strengthen the transformation of the body by the essence. Of course, they would communicate with the outside world from time to time. After all, their spacecraft was a completely legal existence and did not need to keep the communication silent. As a result, they got a news that shocked them. "Fanny, I tell you, I accidentally formed a pillow game today." "Very good, this is very fun." Nanling and Mo stunned for a moment, and then they couldn't help cursing. What kind of talent is this? It seems that it has only been more than 3 months since she broke her own golden pill. It is good for a normal person to recover his physical condition during this period. How did she manage to form a pillow game in 3 months? This time, the cultivation discussion group was very lively. Nanling and Mo were puzzled by Fanny's unscientific cultivation speed. As a result, Fanny said, "I just found that the whole domain recuperation combined with the cultivation of essence and energy seems to have a miraculous effect. So I come to the whole domain recuperation every day. As a result, I was recuperating today and accidentally fell asleep. When I woke up, I succeeded in forming a pill." She seemed to be puzzled by this situation. Mo was stunned for a moment and then expressed helplessness. She could have enjoyed this kind of resource blessing, but now that she has left the ancient domain, she can only practice on her own. Nanling was even more helpless. The technology of this era is really awesome. Rich people can really get immediate results in anything they do. But he didn't feel discouraged or anything, because the essence and energy he cultivated were undoubtedly more handy, and such a foundation would be more solid. Well, he couldn't make up any more, but he could only make up some more easons so that he wouldn't be envious of the separation of the plasmodium and the wall. So angry. P.S. My elbow is not working again these 2 days. It hurts. Chapter 160. Everyone bowls up. Mo was very stimulated by the news that Fanny had formed a pill again, and then he increased his training intensity. Nanling hit some resistance to the boring physical training, because he knew that no matter how hard he tried, he could not catch up with Fanny in this aspect. So he couldn't help but start to want to change the track again. He thought of Talon. His cultivation method had many aspects of bodybuilding. Does this mean that spiritual power can actually help the body become stronger? He discussed this issue with Talon and got a positive answer. In the cultivation school that Talon belongs to, there are many ways to strengthen the body with spiritual power. There are even many similar schools in the entire Star Federation, so the cultivators of the Star Federation generally have stronger bodies. But how is it done specifically? This is not something Nanling can know. This is a secret of each school. Even if Talon leaked these secrets to Nanlin, he would be wanted by his own school. I can't help you with this, but I suggest you start with microscopic control of spiritual power. Tai Long still gave his own advice. Although it was just a vague direction, it was also a hint and inspiration for Nanling. So Nanling started to do something weird again. While exploring the void was boring, he simply focused on the spiritual power in his body. The powerful ability to control spiritual power allowed him to easily make some attempts according to Tai Long's inspiration. Microscopic control of spiritual power. Well, to what extent should this microscopic control of spiritual power be controlled? Can it be done at the cellular level? He really can. He wanted to try to strengthen the cellular level with wind spiritual power. A very tiny wisp of wind spiritual power quietly scraped into the cells of Nanling's left little finger. He chose a place where he had the least to worry about the impact to try. If he failed, the worst thing would be to lose a little finger, which was not painful, and he could regenerate it with space technology. This was a very novel attempt. The dual effects of the auxiliary instrument and divine thoughts allowed him to accurately observe the changes at the cellular level. However, Nanling underestimated the effect of spiritual power on cells, and the cell nucleus that was integrated with wind spiritual power broke directly. Because Nanling found that the smaller the wind spiritual power, the more uncertain it seemed to be. In the microscopic state, various characteristics of wind would randomly emerge, and his control was becoming more and more difficult to reach. Therefore, this wind spiritual power was sometimes warm and slow, sometimes violent and tearing, sometimes sharp and sometimes gentle. The cell that Nanling chose was damaged under this change, and then it couldn't hold on and exploded. A bruise appeared on his little finger, which was a sequelae. Nanling thought about it and realized that this would not work. Relying solely on spiritual power could not directly strengthen the body at the microscopic level, at least not at the cellular level. But he soon had another idea. Tailing and his inheritance did not master the essence, and could only try to directly strengthen the body with spiritual power. But he had essence, so what about adding essence? However, there was a problem. His control over the essence was not as subtle as that of the spiritual power. A stream of essence was moved from the danton to the left hand, which could only ensure that it filled the entire palm, but could not be specific to the cellular level. But it didn't matter. He could observe the cellular level through the auxiliary instrument. During the observation, the cells wrapped in the essence became very active, and they were obviously blessed. At the same time, the previously damaged cells were also recovering rapidly. Obviously, the essence was a magical power for the body. Under the essence, the spiritual power that entered the microscopic level could be contained by the abundant essence no matter how noisy it was. And it was in this case that the cells he controlled were quickly tamed and became more adapted to the existence of wind spiritual power. Strengthening, this should be considered a thorough strengthening. He felt the strength of his essence, and after finding that his theory was feasible, he simply filled his entire left hand with essence, and then used wind spiritual power to transform the cells. No, in fact, this is not the transformation of the body by the wind spirit power, but the adaptive evolution of the body to adapt to the changeable characteristics of the wind spirit power. Therefore, Nanling discovered that the direction of the strengthening of these cells is actually corresponding to the negative characteristics of the wind. The wind has the characteristics of tearing and sharp cutting, so Nanling's cells become more resilient and stronger. The strengthening of ordinary muscle cells in this aspect only makes his arm more resistant to beating, but what about the strengthening of nerve cells? Nanling tried it with one finger and got a particularly flexible finger, which he almost couldn't stop when it jumped. He suddenly felt that he had entered a brand new world. Isn't this going to heaven? To be honest, he was sure that this was an improvement that he shouldn't have in his original world, because the cultivators in that world didn't have equipment such as auxiliary instruments that could help monitor the state of human cells. They naturally couldn't strengthen their bodies to the cellular level. But this came at a price. Nanling felt the consumption of his essence, and at the same time, the life fire in his body began to weaken, and he also felt tired and exhausted all of a sudden, wanting to fall asleep at any time. He understood what was going on at once. It was because his energy was consumed too much. He hurried to find high nutrition food to replenish his loss. Fortunately, he always had the habit of preparing emergency food for himself. The characteristics of emergency food are that it may not taste good, but it is definitely high in energy and nutrition, and can be stored for a long time. Nanling ate a tube of nutritional gel, and immediately felt a sense of fullness that almost made him vomit. Soon his stomach felt like it was going to burst. But this feeling of distension did not last long. His body had absorbed it all, and it was constantly turning into the energy he needed. In the process, Nanling shared his discovery in the cultivation discussion group. There was no way Fanna had made him envious of her before, and now he wanted to make Fanna feel annoyed. However, after he shared his discovery in the group, he found that everyone's reactions seemed quite indifferent. Fanna said, "This idea is quite good, but I found that after forming the golden elixir again this time, my golden elixir naturally radiated a fusion of essence and spiritual power, and the power of divine thoughts, and began a new round of strengthening at the body. So it's almost done, and you can get all these benefits by forming the golden elixir earlier." Nanling. ... He began to feel depressed. But Mo said after studying it, "It can't be generalized like this. If you start strengthening from the basics like Xiaonan, you should have stronger potential in the future. But this is of no use to me. After all, my family itself has a secret method of using spiritual power to stimulate and strengthen its own body. But Xiaonan's talent is really amazing. You are catching up with the foundation of our family very quickly with your own strength." She seemed amazed. Looking at Nanling, it was as if she saw the rise of a new family. Then she immediately remembered her identity. Oh my God, isn't she going to become the mistress of this newly rising family? Mo was thinking about it, but Nanling was a little disappointed. Unexpectedly, his little creativity was just catching up with others. No, he was not curled enough, he had to curl himself up. Chapter 161. Unstoppable Training. The inspection of this channel took a month, and no discovery was made. Nanling used this month to make a comprehensive adjustment to his body, so that all the cells in his body could adapt to the existence of wind spirit power. The most difficult part of this process was the internal organs, because the cells of the internal organs were the most fragile, so Nanling had to be very careful when doing this. The only important discovery for him was that he relied on essence and energy, and its effect was no worse than the whole body recovery state, such as recovery and recuperation. Even because essence and energy were the power in his body, it seemed nothing wrong to return to the body now. This process was that he refined essence and energy, and then used essence and energy to transform into the cell level to exist and digest wind spirit power, and then he supplemented the body's loss by eating and refined essence again. In this cycle, his body became more and more solid, and gradually revealed some changes that he had never thought of. That is, in his body cells, some wind spirit power could be slowly retained. This change is quite interesting. Although it is only a very small point, it has also caused a very remarkable change in his body at the macro level. The most intuitive thing is that his cultivation speed has improved again. His body's ability to withstand wind spiritual power has been greatly enhanced, which also means that his efficiency in refining wind spiritual power has been greatly improved. Originally, he only needed to practice step by step and slowly fill up the 9 formations of foundation building. And now he has increased this speed again. If his initial practice, the speed of refining spiritual power is like a tightly tightened faucet leaking, dripping into his body drop by drop. Then after the foundation is successfully built, his practice is to officially turn on the faucet, and the water flows out in a stream. Now, his spiritual power accumulation speed is like turning on this faucet completely, and the water rushes out. If it is not well received, it will splash all over. Spiritual power is constantly injected from the spirit furnace, and then runs quickly in his body, and is refined into spiritual power that he fully controls. It was during this month that his cultivation officially broke through to the 5th level of foundation building. This speed is really fast, and only those who perform spiritual power infusion every now and then can leave him behind. But there is no way, the people around Nanling seem to be able to infuse spiritual power as a daily existence, and he still feels no sense of superiority in the speed of cultivation. In fact, it is also true that the children of wealthy families such as the Ge family and the Feng family really start to think about cultivation after the 9th level of Ge refining. Before that, countless resources are poured in, and each one can at least cultivate a position that ordinary people may not be able to reach in their lifetime. Nanling felt suffocated at this time, and felt suffocated for most people in this era. It is very likely that the achievements of their lifetime efforts are just the starting point for the children of wealthy families. This is a threshold set in secret by the wealthy families who control resources. Only by crossing it can you be qualified to participate in the affairs of the wealthy families. If you can't cross it, then you can only stay in your own circle. Suddenly, Nanling thought of something. Did Fanny's uncle ask to marry Mo before, really because he simply wanted to separate Mo's family from Fanny and her father? I'm afraid what they really value is Mo's potential. Mo is almost going to achieve the golden core, and becoming the golden core is also that beginning of her changing her destiny. Because after the golden core stage, cultivation is no longer completely resource-driven, or the cultivator's own talent must also keep up, otherwise it will be difficult to make any progress after the golden core. Nanling is not sure whether his guess is correct. After all, this era uses scientific thinking to look at the matter of cultivation, and it is unknown whether it can still assist cultivation after the golden core stage. However, Nanling has entered a new cycle. He constantly strengthens his body with essence and spiritual power, then recovers through food supplements, and then extracts more essence and refines more spiritual power from the strengthened body. This makes his body present a spiral upward state. The more he practices, the stronger he becomes, and the stronger he practices, the more he practices. He gradually becomes addicted to it. He really experienced the joy of cultivation. Every day, his mind is thinking about cultivation and various equipment, so that he has no interest in women. This made Mo very angry. Although he was a superficial husband and wife, how could he take it seriously? The concentration of Shinxi Bang Road made her very ashamed and did not want to disturb his practice. so she could only follow the roll-up passively, and she started to practice seriously. The Supreme 4 on the title opened the crazy inner volume mode. Only Mrs. Antarctic was watching the junior's hard smiles. Then he once again intuitively felt the gains of this month. In the hyperspace, first he found that his head was not so dizzy. Then, although he felt extremely heavy, he could barely open his eyes. For the first time, he saw a bizarre hyperspace with his own eyes. This was different from what he saw through the various monitoring devices on the ship. These monitoring devices were made according to the current cognition of humans, so the scenes they could shoot were also within the scope of this cognition. Now when Nanling opened his eyes, he saw many colorful spots of light passing quickly in front of his eyes. He found that what he saw in front of him was also very different from usual, as if it had been twisted and pulled. Even his favorite good system No, that delicate face seemed to have turned into a shoehorn, which looked very interesting. But the next moment he felt an unbearable dizziness again. The amount of information that his brain could bear reached its limit again. He closed his heavy eyelids uncontrollably, but the consciousness that sank into the intelligence core began to depict the scenes he had seen before. However, something he didn't expect happened. He wanted to describe what he had just seen in the form of data, but his intelligence core suddenly overloaded and restarted. It seemed that at that moment, the information involved in his brain had greatly exceeded the limit that his intelligence core could carry. Chapter 162. Catone's intelligence core. Nanling felt lost. At this moment, even his intelligence core couldn't be used. What should he do? What else could he do? Just lie down and let it go. His consciousness fell into a deep sleep, and when he woke up, he had already come out of the hyperspace. Then he felt that the atmosphere next to him was a little strange, because Mo was frowning and looking at him, as if expressing some dissatisfaction. He asked, "What's wrong?" Mo didn't say anything, just looked at him quietly. Madame Nanji couldn't stand it anymore, she said, "We sent you many messages, why didn't you reply to any of them?" Nanling suddenly realized it, and then said embarrassedly, "My intelligence core is broken, and it hasn't been restarted yet." Everyone was surprised when they heard it. "Is there such a thing?" Mrs. Nanji asked in surprise, "Didn't you buy your intelligence core only 2 years ago?" "No, a 3-piece set usually won't break down for 20 years. What did you do?" Nanling smiled bitterly and said, "I just saw some scenes in hyperspace and wanted to record them. As a result, the intelligence core got stuck and restarted by itself." Mrs. Nanji and Mo are both surprised. They noticed the key information that Nanling said. "You can open your eyes in hyperspace?" Mo asked in surprise. Nanling nodded and said, "It's the first time I've done it. I guess it's because I've recently strengthened my body with my spirit and spiritual power, which has greatly improved my body's endurance and my brain's thinking ability." He took off the smart core and said, "It hasn't restarted yet. It seems that it has been stuffed with too much information and can't operate. How can I fix it?" Madame Nanji heard this and said, "It has a backup system. That system rarely works at ordinary times. It exists just in case. You can use your authority to give it an order to reset it. Or you can only add external storage space to it so that it can complete the information processing. Remember to turn on the automatic deletion function of the smart core. I always feel that she has a lot of experience." Nanling's eyes lit up immediately after hearing this. He has stored a lot of things in this smart core. It would be a pity if he really lost them all. Then he quickly put on his new armor. Pure color faith. This armor is indeed high-end, with its own auxiliary intelligence system, which allows the smart core to process various information more efficiently. At the same time, it naturally has a larger storage space. When pure color faith was put on his body, the memory space of the armor connected to the intelligence core, and the stuck intelligence core was indeed completed and finally restarted successfully. However, Nanling saw a series of alarm indications under the artistic visor of pure color faith. That means that the memory space of pure color faith was almost full, and the system load rate reached 90%, and it almost overloaded and restarted again. Nanling was speechless. What on earth did he stuff in? Why was it so full? And it was the kind that he didn't have time to delete. Just when he was about to say that he needed to install some more memory sticks, the alarm on the bridge suddenly sounded. "How did we encounter looters?" Lady Antarctic muttered. Then Xiaohua, the AI of the purple iris, had already turned on the monitoring and saw 2 looters' shabby starships gathering here. Talon couldn't wait to say, "Let me attack." Lady Antarctic saw that he was ready to fight and said, "Go." Talon went excitedly. He hit the qualifications to be confident, because the raiders were made up of people who couldn't make it in the normal world but were unwilling to live an ordinary life. They might have some talents, but those talents were basically not up to par. So Talon was confident that he could handle the two shabby starships of the raiders by himself. Mo said, "I'll get ready too." She was going to raid the formation. Of course, Nanling wanted to go too. After all, this was a rare space battle, and he was just about to try out the effect of the Welling wingsuit. So he temporarily forgot about installing the memory stick and also went to the hangar to load the Welling wingsuit. As a result, as soon as the Welling wingsuit was installed, Nanling's intelligence core load suddenly soared to 95%, which really scared him. He didn't care about this 5% increase before, but now he felt it was very serious. Under the high load, he felt that the pendant with the intelligence core hanging on his neck was constantly getting hot, as if it would burn at any time. But at this time he couldn't stop to sort out these things. He and Mo stood on the launcher in the hangar together, and then were launched into space together. They were a little slower than Talon, so they were his backup. However, when flying in space, Nanling had to carefully watch the load rate that rose to 97%, for fear that the smart core would restart again. That would be miserable for him. For this reason, when Mo beside him had already folded the two wings of the Welling wingsuit into an acute angle, and then the tip ejected high-energy particle streams to enter the high-speed flight mode, Nanling still maintained a combat cruise posture, for fear that switching postures would bring more information interaction and thus increase the load. Even as a last resort, Nanling could only rely on his own consciousness to help the smart core process information, which reduced the load rate of the smart core again, slowly falling back to 92%. In this process, Nanling also discovered the difference between his human brain and the smart core in the way they process information. The smart core processes information, which requires analyzing all known conditions, and making multiple judgments on various conditions, and then making the optimal solution. The human brain can directly give the answer, no matter whether the answer is right or wrong, the human brain can directly give the result. What Nanling is doing now is to participate in the various complex logics of the intelligence core, and then not look at the underlying logic in operation, and directly issue instructions based on his own judgment. Then the intelligence core will plan and identify according to the instructions he issued, which greatly reduces the computing cost. It feels like his brain has become an external brain that can simplify the thinking process of the intelligence core. At first, Nanling felt a little uncomfortable, but when he got used to it, he suddenly felt that it was not bad. Countless information appeared on the visor in front of him. These information belonged to the different modules of the Pure Faith and the Welling wingsuit. At this time, they kept popping up and disappearing. This was Nanling's brain processing this information. Of course, a normal person's brain cannot do this, but Nanling's current thinking speed has long surpassed the scope of ordinary people after being strengthened many times. On the contrary, this can fully stimulate his thinking ability. At this time, Talon was approaching the two raider ships. They probably didn't expect that a small family ship would dare to fight back, so they also released their own space fighters to prepare for the battle. However, Talon just danced through them. The looters did attack, but Talon's chaotic rolling in space was too difficult to hit. Mo said helplessly, "Let me do it, Shonen will support from the back. Talon, you can adjust yourself and join the battle." As she said that, she rushed directly into the enemy's space fighter group at a high speed, flying up and down like a butterfly, and bursts of fire exploded around her. "It's beautiful," Nanling praised, and then took out his sniper from the right-wing weapon bay. Long-range support, it depends on his shooting skills. He used himself as a support in the void, and leaned back slightly in a sitting posture to hold up the gun. Then the muzzle suddenly lit up, a beam of light shot out, and a space fighter in the distance was blown up on the spot. Nanling's archery skills are also at level 5. Chapter 163 Obtaining Key Information. One after another, the space fighters of the raiders were blown up into fireworks in space. They were horrified to find that they had encountered two killing gods. Wu Zhou, who shuttled through the raiders like a butterfly, was like the god of death wielding a sickle, harvesting the lives of the raiders like crops in the field. And the Pure Faith, who was shooting continuously in a cold and precise manner in the distance, was like an evil ghost in the dark, causing them to die suddenly on the spot. So when Talon finally calibrated his faulty Welling wingsuit and flew back, the raiders had actually fled in all directions, and did not dare to touch the edge of Wu Zhou and Pure Faith again. "Damn it, why are you running away?" Talon was humbly furious. Nanling was speechless as he looked at his comprehensive shooting ability that had reached LV6 at some point. It seems that his genes must have this kind of enhancement, but he didn't know what the limit of this enhancement would be. Mo said, "Capture their starships. I can take charge of one." Talon said, "Then I'll take charge of the other one." He rushed over impatiently, knocked open the hatch of a starship with his big axe, and then rushed in like a whirlwind. Mo stayed on the outer deck of the starship, and when the defensive weapons on the starship turned their guns to aim at her, suddenly all the guns turned their guns again. Then the data interface of the entire starship was fully opened, and it interacted with the AI Xiao on the purple iris. Mo's capture was completed, and she directly hacked the old intelligence system of the spacecraft. In contrast, Talon was still fighting hard there. Nanling had returned to the purple iris. He returned to the hangar to find the memory to plug in himself. This feeling of anxiety was really terrible. At the same time, he was also checking the information sent back from Mo. But this time he really just used his flesh brain to read it, and did not use the intelligence core to read it. Although the information read by the intelligence core will be very convenient after being filtered, he is really afraid that his intelligence core will explode and become unusable. At this time, the intelligence core is just a transfer, so the memory occupancy rate is naturally much less. And he did not have much difficulty reading with his physical brain. Obviously, in terms of information intake and processing, his brain has made great progress, at least not worse than his current Zifng intelligence core. The only disadvantage is that it consumes more mental energy, but of course he can afford it. From these intelligence, he saw many interesting things. The most important of them is that there is a looter's base on their route. This base does not belong to anyone, nor is it built by any looters. Instead, some looters accidentally discovered it while evading the pursuit of the White Feather Legion. They found that the construction of this base is very complete, and there is also high technology that can avoid the detection of the White Feather Legion. More importantly, this looter's base was discovered 10 years ago, which immediately pierced Nanling's sensitive nerves. Is it this route? Lady Nanji nodded heavily and said, "That may be the case. But just in case, we still have to enter the base to explore." Nanling had already added twice the memory space to his pure color faith. However, what made him speechless was that he almost watched the memory space being quickly occupied, and finally stopped at 80%. It was as if the scene he saw in the hyperspace before was some kind of intelligent virus. No matter how large the memory was, it would be almost gone in its rapid expansion. Even if Nanling wanted to delete it, it couldn't. No matter how much information he deleted, the subsequent information would continue to reappear. And this information itself was worthless to Nanling. It was all the analysis and calculation of the abnormal and distorted things he saw by the intelligence core. Because there were so many absurdities, so that the calculations could get different results again and again, it caused the load of the intelligence core to increase greatly. In fact, the intelligence core has already been automatically deleting invalid data, otherwise it would not maintain the load at 80%, but would burn itself out every minute. For this kind of thing, Nanling could only admit that his intelligence core was broken, and the only way to solve it was to replace it with a brand new one. But no one could have thought that his intelligence core would have problems, so there was really no spare on the purple iris at this time. Nanling could only express regret for this. This kind of thing should have been extremely troublesome, but Nanling did not seem to be anxious at all. Because he discovered the fragility of this intelligence core, it gave him a huge sense of security. "Little guy, you are being controlled, right?" Nanling was quite happy. So he simply didn't bother to pay attention to these, just treat it as if there is 80% redundant data in his intelligence core, and just make do with it. Who didn't make do with computers in the previous life? Anyway, Nanling accepted this matter all at once. He tossed his intelligence core at this time, and suddenly saw brilliant sparks appearing in the starry sky. It turned out that the raider starship that Talon boarded exploded. Nanling shook his head and sighed, "This man is too irritable." But then Lady Nanji issued a rescue order. Nanling asked in astonishment, "Was Talon killed in the explosion?" Lady Nanji said helplessly, "At least he didn't lose contact." Nanling thought to himself, why bother? Talon was too unlucky. Helplessly, he could only attack again and reunite with Mo, who had successfully dealt with the raider starship, to prepare for the search and rescue of Talon. Nanling's welling wingsuit also folded back into an acute angle, and then flew at a rapid speed. The maximum speed has reached 15% of the speed of light, which is extremely fast. During this process, Nanling felt his body sink, and the mass of the whole person increased rapidly with the increase in speed. Unfortunately, with the current technology of mankind, it is far from being able to travel at the speed of light. After all, the closer to the speed of light, the higher the mass of the material will be, and the energy consumption will be too great. Nanling accelerated for 2 minutes and had to slow down because there were too many fragments produced by the explosion in front, and he didn't want to crash into it. At this time, Talen's position had been determined, and Nanling and Mo were tracking his direction. The surveillance soon showed Talen turning rapidly like a gyroscope, and he was flying away at an astonishing speed. At this time, Nanling saw Mo chasing from another direction, but there were too many debris along the way, so she couldn't speed up. She said, "Find a way to get him to my side, I can slow him down." Nanling responded immediately after hearing this, and used the wind cannon technique on Talen. Guided by his divine thoughts, without any calculation of the intelligence core, he directly drew spiritual power from the spirit furnace and performed it. The process was very smooth, and it was obvious that the importance of the three-piece set to Nanling was further reduced. Whether it was due to an accident or something else, he was constantly training himself to be able to do more things independently. The wind cannon technique is a simulated airflow bombardment of spiritual power, which instantly increased the speed in the void. Then it hit Talen's back armor hard, and blasted him in the direction of Mo. Seeing this, Mo gave Nanling a thumbs up, and then activated her own magnetic field control, immediately capturing the chaotically tumbling Talen, and quickly reducing its tumbling speed. "Is he dead?" Lady Nanji asked. Mo said, "Although the bioelectric field is very chaotic, fortunately it is still there. That means he is not dead." Lady Nanji sighed, "He is still very strong." Chapter 164. The door is about to open. Talen was rescued, but he was paralyzed on one side. His spine was dislocated, which was caused by Nanling's wind cannon. But he didn't have time to bother Nanling, because he had just been through a terrible situation that almost shook his brain, and it was difficult to recover now. The more important thing now is to find that base of the robbers. There will undoubtedly be more gains in the base, and hope to get key information. After the team was gathered, they didn't even care about the captured robber starship, and didn't care whether they could seize anything. They rushed directly to the robbers' base with a clear goal. Facts have proved that their idea is correct, because although this base seems to be on full alert, it has not actually opened the real defense because they came too quickly. In fact, this place can be called simple. Lady Nanji said, "It's really lucky. It seems that these robbers haven't had time to build this place yet." According to the information obtained from the broken ship before, this group of robbers has only 3 large ships in total. The other one should not be here. Nanling saw the situation of this robber station on the bridge. To be honest, there is really nothing much to say. It is just a shack built by some old steel plates on an extremely cutting-edge building entity. The simple environment, people even have to wear spacesuits to move around on it. And the exposed entities that look very intimidating form are full of irony. Nanling also suspected that the people here probably slept on their own ships, and even if they got off the ship to move around, they would not easily take off their spacesuits or combat uniforms. This is due to the mutual suspicion between the robbers. This place, as a station occupied by multiple robbers, has not developed for 10 years. I'm afraid it is precisely because of this suspicion. Nanling said, "Have they discovered us?" Mo suddenly said coldly, "I'm afraid they only know that their 2 ships are in trouble, but they don't know we're here. Because I found that the ship I captured actually didn't send any useful information here except for the information that it kept cursing at the other ship." Lady Nanji smiled and said, "This is the looters. They are not a force, but just a group of people who are forced to stay together for warmth. This way we can do a lot." Nanling understood, if we can hide, the looters' detection ability may not be able to detect us. So, Mo glanced at him with a smile in her eyes, and then said, "So we can just wing such attack directly, go straight to the target and don't have to worry about anything else." This is Nanling's favorite thing. The previous wing such attack obviously didn't satisfy him enough, and he must do it again this time. Lady Nanji said, "Then you can attack, I will still provide you with technical support in the rear." Nanling attacked, Mo attacked. The 2 were launched from the hangar again, flew silently in the void for a while, and then quietly landed on the side of the asteroid that served as the base, without attracting the attention of any looters. Then Nanling felt bored. This feeling of having no place to display all his martial arts was really terrible. Why did he match such an opponent? He began to complain that his opponent was not strong enough. The 2 of them flew along the asteroid and conducted detection scans at the same time. Ignoring the looters, they have discovered that this asteroid is definitely full of secrets. The exposed part of the building entity should be a docking pier, and the rest is hidden inside the asteroid. Even for the exposed docking pier, Nanling suspected that the looters were not even qualified to use it. They circled around, judged the spatial structure of the asteroid, and then landed on the pier. On the pier, those miscellaneous buildings were simply an eyesore, and the messy appearance made Nanling almost unable to distinguish what the pier should look like. When they arrived here, the remaining looters discovered their arrival, and then ran out of the shacks with shouts and prepared to attack. Nanling was actually quite speechless about this. He watched their performance as if he was watching a pantomime. Then he raised his hand and fired a wind cannon in that direction. A hurricane suddenly arose, and then the shack area over there experienced a violent demolition. Countless broken boards were thrown out, and many figures were thrown into the void. Mo looked at this scene and said in surprise, "Your wind cannon technique seems to have become much more powerful." Nanling also looked at his palm unexpectedly, and then realized that it was because of the problem with his intelligence core that he subconsciously mobilized the spiritual power in the spirit furnace with his mind and then stimulated it through the talisman board. In the process, his own body also released the same spiritual power, which was equivalent to performing a double wind cannon technique. More importantly, he found that his body was completely different after being strengthened by the wind spiritual power. Not only was the wind technique extremely smooth, but more importantly, it could also enhance the wind technique. Anyway, his wind technique was stronger than before, both in terms of power and controllability. He said, "It's because of my physical strengthening during this period. I didn't expect that physical strengthening would have this effect." Mo was stunned for a moment. She found that this seemed different from her own family's secret teachings. Could it be that Nanling's method was more effective? But no matter what, she was very happy that Nanling could make such progress. At this time, sporadic energy beams shot from the dock shack area that had just been ravaged by the storm. Nanling and Mo didn't care much about these, they landed directly on the dock. After Nanling swept away some of the shacks that blocked the view, they had discovered that these looters actually didn't really own this station. Because there was an obvious entrance here, which was a very tall and wide gate with many traces of smashing and burning on it. But these traces were very shallow, in fact, they just damaged a little bit of its surface coating. Obviously, the looters had no way to deal with this gate. At this time, many supports that people can walk on were built in front of this gate. Nanling and Mo stood on this row of supports and looked at the gate and connected to Madame Nanji and said, "Is there a way to hack in?" Mo said, "I tried it. This gate has been demagnetized. My magnetic control can't affect it. And I can't access its system. Its firewall is very powerful." She felt a little frustrated. Obviously, she didn't expect to encounter a high-end thing that made her helpless. Madame Nanji said in a solemn voice, "Do you see the symbol of flames and flowing wind?" Nanling replied, "I see it." Madame Nanji said, "Go over and stand in front of that symbol. If I'm not wrong, that's the symbol of the Changsheng Association, and it's also an identity verification system. You're the key." Nanling was silent for a while, then walked up. If he can open these mysteries, then let him open them. Chapter 165. Will there be any hidden dangers? Nanling stood in front of the sign, and he felt quite strange. He said, "Actually, seeing this sign means that we are not looking in the wrong direction, right?" Madame Nanji said, "Yes, we're very lucky. Originally, I was even prepared to find all the routes but find nothing in the end." Madame Nanji's tone was also full of excitement. Nanling smiled, then opened the private message with Mo and said, "I found that my luck has improved since I left Boss Fana." Mo smiled and said, "Be careful or I will complain to Fana that you are saying bad things about her behind her back." Nanling said, "TSK, don't forget that we are a family now, sister, you can't turn your elbow outward." Mo was a little embarrassed when she heard this. She turned her head away and didn't say anything, but switched to the connection with Madame Nanji and said, "How do I do this identity authentication?" She was shy. Madame Nanji said, "Use the intelligence core to try to connect to this portal." Nanling said, "I tried it, but it didn't work." Then he moved his mind and directly probed into the sign on the portal with his divine consciousness. The next moment, he heard an electronic voice. "Unknown consciousness detected, please confirm identity." Nanling knew that he was right. This portal really needs divine consciousness to open, which means that the person who manages these daily affairs on the Nanji Changsheng must at least be in the foundation building stage with divine consciousness. It is worthy of being the legendary Changsheng Xian Zhao. But how to identify the identity? He passed this thought over. The portal quickly responded. You can provide a token, identification information, or conduct a genetic test. Nanling knew what was going on at a glance. Lady Nanji said that he was the key, obviously requiring him to undergo a genetic test. He did not hesitate and directly covered the sign with his palm. Then the palm of pure color faith opened a hole, and the external vacuum did not make Nanling's palm feel uncomfortable, because his strong body was not afraid of this level of vacuum suction. And the next moment, he felt a slight stab in his palm. But there was no bleeding when the palm was removed, which should be some kind of minimally invasive technology for extracting genetic information. After a short wait, the system that his mind was connected to said, "The genetic information has been confirmed. Welcome, respected General Ling Yu." As soon as the voice fell, the gate slowly opened. Nanling looked at the gate in front of him and asked in surprise, "I'm General Ling Yu." The system replied, "Yes, before losing contact with the Antarctic Changshen, we received news that the Ling Yu Guard had been annihilated. You are the last Ling Yu Guard. According to the Ling Yu Guard's appointment sequence, you have automatically been promoted to General Ling Yu." Nanling. ... He found the highlight in it, that is, he is a general of his own. He groaned unconsciously, and felt that he was quite at a loss. At this time, the gate was completely opened. Mo looked at Nanling and asked, "Can I go in?" Nanling nodded and said, "Don't worry, go in, I have obtained the highest authority here." Mo was quite surprised to hear this, but she didn't say anything, and walked into this place with Nanling. At the same time, Nanling also sent a message to Lady Nanji. "Bring the purple iris over here. I have given the identification code." Lady Nanji also responded. However, at the same time, the weapon system of the entire base has been activated, and any looters who attempt to sneak in will be killed by a cannon. The looters were very surprised. They did not expect that the secret place they found would actually be opened by someone. They obviously met the real owner. After a while, the purple iris slowly entered this place without any obstruction. Nanling said, "There are 3 large space-folding warehouses here, 2 of which are full and 1 is empty. Is there any spare space on the purple iris?" Lady Nanji said, "Of course there is. After all, this ship was not fully loaded. Now we can dismantle the original warehouse and replace it with these 3 warehouses. This is one of the supply stations of the Antarctic Changshen. This is not a simple material supply, but a supply of various cutting-edge equipment." Nanling had briefly checked the warehouse before and found that there were many things inside that he had never heard of. He could only lament that he had little knowledge. But there was one thing, he saw many parts suitable for making wingsuits, which meant that Talon's Unit Naught could be saved. But Madame Nanji didn't care much about this matter. She just asked, "What about the trace of the immortal boat of immortality?" Nanling said, "There is only the location of the last communication with the immortal boat of immortality, which is the location of the incident 18 years ago." He paused for a moment, then said, 18 years ago, something happened to the Nanji Changshen, and the final disbanding and concealment order was sent. All peripheral forces belonging to the Changshen Society must erase their memories and be sent back to the human world as soon as possible. Only some core personnel are qualified to retain their memories and reopen the secrets of the Changshen Society when the time is right. General Ling Yu, who was created by the genes of the 2 immortals of the Changshen Xianzhou, is one of these candidates, because General Ling Yu is destined to be loyal to the Changshen Society. He said it calmly. Madame Nanji nodded and said, "Yes, you are the crucial key." Unexpectedly, Mo suddenly said in a strong tone, "No, it's not." Madame Nanji was surprised. Mo looked at Nanling and said, "You have your own free will. You are the Nanling who has relied on your own abilities and ideas to step by step to become my husband. You are not a tool made by others." She was very serious. Even when she said the word husband, she obviously hesitated for a moment, but the meaning she wanted to express was very heartwarming. Upon hearing this, Nanling immediately smiled and said, "Of course, I have a clear distinction between these." Madame Nanji suddenly apologized, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean that just now, She had no way to explain, because her words just now regarded Nanling as the key to reopen the secrets of the Changshen Society, which had completely objectified him. Seeing this, Nanling shook his head and said, "There is no need to explain more. I'm not such a hypocritical person." In the eyes of the people around him, Nanling's life experience is too pitiful, right? Without parents, and not born naturally, but an artificial human being cultivated in a petri dish, or a person cultivated as a war machine. Nanling's indifference at this time was considered strong in the eyes of others. But at this moment, Tai Long, who was recovering from his injuries, suddenly said, Is there any hidden danger in his body that must be controlled by the Changsheng Society? The atmosphere was instantly silent, and this was also the part that Nanling was very worried about. At this time, Madame Nanji shook her head decisively and said, "How is it possible? There are no hidden dangers in his body." She looked at everyone and said in a very certain tone, "Although I don't know why I am so confident, I am completely sure of this." Mo took a deep breath and said, "Let's find that Changsheng Xianzhao as soon as possible, then everything will be solved." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 166. Aunt is also a mother. When the Purple Iris set sail again, the atmosphere on the bridge was somewhat depressed and depressing. Everyone was worried about Nanling's condition. Even if Lady Nanji promised, she herself had her memory cleared. How could such a promise be trusted? After all, Tai Long was still hated. Who made this guy talk nonsense and point out some things that everyone had deliberately avoided? To be honest, Nanling himself was a little suspicious. He even conducted a comprehensive physical examination on the Purple Iris and analyzed his genetic map. Then something unexpected happened. His genetic composition does have ancient genes from the Feng family and the Gu family, which belonged to Feng Xianji and Gu Xianjin. But the problem is that in addition to these two genes, there is another gene used to reconcile the two. Where did this gene come from? Lady Nanji was stunned for a while, and then said, "This gene should come from me." She was a little dazed, her pupils were completely out of focus, as if she remembered something. She said, "It's my genes, and this is what I did." As she spoke, her eyes softened when she looked at Nanling, and she said, "You are my child." Nanling was in a trance for a moment, then smiled bitterly and said, "Then should I call you Mom?" Madame Nanji shook her head and said, "No, this matter, just pretend it never happened." She actually backed off. If we were to do some psychological profiling of Madame Nanji's complex psychology at this time, it would be that she regarded Nanling as her own child, but she didn't want to really have a child. It was very contradictory. And it was rare to see Madame Nanji at such a loss. Nanling said readily, "Okay, then what should I call you?" He wanted to find a proper title. In fact, he had always had a vague feeling before, so he never gave Madame Nanji a formal title. Madame Nanji thought for a while and said, "How about you just call me Auntie?" Good guy, this is a sister out of nothing. After all, the title of aunt in social relations belongs to mother's sister. This title is rare in the current era and is actually quite retro. And Nanling called Madame Nanji aunt, doesn't that mean that he is actually Madame Nanji's sister's son? The logical relationship here is very confusing. Nanling said helplessly, "Okay, let's do it, Aunt Nanji." Although Madame Nanji still felt a little strange, she was satisfied after all. Although she was also worried about this matter, many things would not be answered until she arrived on the Namji Changsheng. Now that the route of the Changsheng Xianzhou has been completely determined, and even the last communication point has been found, it is not difficult to find the location of the Namji Changsheng. Everything went unexpectedly smoothly, even better than the best-case scenario expected by Madame Nanji. It was as if their group was destined to return to the Namji Changsheng. They immediately recalibrated the course and then entered hyperspace. As for the vacated station, no one cared. So what if those looters occupied it? After another 2 hours of hyperspace flight, they arrived in a void. This was the place where the Antarctic Eternal Life sent out its last signal, and it was also the place where Nanling and his Nanji aunt boarded the escape ship. Mo said, "We have detected it, and there is nothing here. Should we continue to set sail?" Nanji's wife had a complicated expression. He said, "Wait a minute, Xiaonan, can you accompany me to the deck outside to take a look here? I always feel that there might be something here that reminds me of something." Nanling obeyed immediately after hearing this. He had nothing to be sentimental about, after all, he had no missing memories. As for the responsibility that suddenly came to him from his bloodliner, it just made him feel extremely embarrassed, and he wanted to give up. But there was no way, he was indeed very concerned about the problem that Tai Long suddenly pointed out. What if there was really any serious limitation in his body? He was worried. Even if there was no problem in the self-examination, he was still worried. Because of this feeling of insecurity, he had to continue this trip. Nanling and Nanji's wife came to the bridge. Under the energy shield of the spacecraft, even the exposed deck has air that can sustain life. This spacecraft still retains the traditional deck, on the one hand, for that convenience of loading and unloading cargo in the cargo hold, and on the other hand, for that consideration of comfort and enjoyment. After all, it is the family ship of a rich family. Why do rich people drive a ship to travel in the starry sky? Isn't it just for the good scenery and leisurely mood? There is even a space for the transformation of a swimming pool on this deck, so that the rich can raise mermaids in the pool. At this time, Nanling followed Mrs. Nanji on the bridge and looked at the dark void. In fact, it is not a good view after looking at it for a long time, and it may even make people feel some fear of deep space. Mrs. Nanji standing here seemed to be touched. She said with a faint sadness, "It seems that it is really difficult for you to accompany me on this trip. But I can't help it. I lost my past and must find it back." Nanling nodded to show that this is completely understandable. He didn't say anything, but just stood calmly with Mrs. Nanji. After a long while, he saw that Madame Nanji had not responded, so he said, "Then shall we set off?" Unexpectedly, when Madame Nanji turned around, she was frowning. She said, "Something is wrong. I think the old me must have left me some information here." Nanling was very surprised. What was going on? Madame Nanji paced back and forth. She said, "Although I don't know what kind of person I was before, it is obviously not my style to sit and wait for death after my memory is wiped out. So I must have left some tricks." She paused suddenly and turned to Nanling and said, "You are one. I should have used you as a coordinate of my psychological suggestion, so that even if my memory was wiped out, I would remember something because of your existence. Yes, no wonder I was able to name you Nanling when my mind was blank, and the first thing I thought of when I gave myself a nickname was Namji. As expected of me." How could she brag about herself? However, Nanling still had to admit that his aunt was indeed very powerful. She could even use her own methods to retrieve her memory after it was wiped out. He said, yes, you are the best. So what have you found in this place?" Madame Nanji felt that the brat was mocking her, but she had no evidence. However, she also said with some doubts, "I just feel that I am unwilling to leave here like this." It was a very idealistic statement. Nanling said very happily, "In this case, let's stay and explore." He suddenly realized that the only one who was really anxious about this matter was Madame Nanji. As for him, if he was looking for his own life experience, then he already knew his life experience from the previous genetic test. As for the secrets attached to that life experience, he didn't care at all. He just wanted to eliminate the possible hidden dangers in his body. P.S. My hand is a little better today, I'm in a good mood, and I will update more. Chapter 167 Dark Space. Nanling suddenly put on the pure color faith, and then called the Welling Wing suit in the hangar. He jumped off the deck, and then the Welling Wing suit was loaded behind him, giving him interstellar acceleration ability. He flew out of the shield range of the purple iris and began to exploring this dark and empty void. Then he found something wrong. "Can you hear me?" he shouted loudly. Because he found something wrong after flying out. At this time, Lady Nanji in a rose-red armor also appeared behind him. It can be seen that the unpainted Welling Wing suit loaded on Lady Nanji's armor is not so suitable. No wonder she is generally reluctant to go out in a wingsuit. "What's wrong?" she asked. Nanling said, "Something is wrong. My gaseous perception found something wrong here." Madame Nanji asked in surprise, "You can still maintain gaseous perception in the void environment?" Nanling said, "Although it is more laborious to maintain it with pure spiritual power, the simulated wind created by spiritual power will still bring me some information. Just like at this moment, under the induction of this simulated wind, I feel that there are many trace particles around. I'm not sure if that will cause us to lose contact with the purple iris, so I tried it." Then he frowned and said, "Let's go back." We lost contact with the purple iris. During the time he was talking, the people who stayed on the purple iris did not respond, which was already a problem. He turned back in a hurry, and Madame Nanji could only follow him at this time. On the way back, they met Mo, who hurried over. "You're back, great." Mo was greatly relieved when he saw Nanling and Madame Nanji. Nanling said, "We must have encountered some kind of dark matter again." He said helplessly, "Why do we always encounter this kind of communication isolation every time we encounter dark matter?" Mo asked, "Is it the inert proton again?" Nanling said, "No, it's different from that one. I'm already very familiar with the inert proton. Its feedback in the wind is different from this one." Madame Nanji also understood after hearing this, "So that's it. Is it some kind of dark matter that affects our detection and senses?" Then the effect of this dark matter. As she spoke, she looked at the dark and deep void in front of her, and then understood. No wonder this starry sky looks so dark. Nanling sighed and said, I don't know what kind of effect this dark matter will have on the human body. As she spoke, a colorful aurora suddenly appeared beside Mo. This aurora radiated around her body, making her look very stunning. Nanling asked, what is this? Mo said, you reminded me, since your gaseous perception can detect this substance, then my magnetic field perception should be able to detect it. And I did it. I empowered the surrounding space with precise magnetic field manipulation, and these particles immediately jumped and underwent such changes after being empowered by me. Mrs. Nanji observed silently for a while before saying, from my detection perspective, these are photons that suddenly appeared. Your magnetic field empowers unknown particles, causing them to jump into photons. Mo shook his head. It may also be that one particle unknown to us has jumped into another unknown particle, but photons were released in that process. If we have time, I must study the mystery here carefully, but it doesn't seem to be the time now. Mrs. Nanji shook her head and said, on the contrary, we have to stay here and study this dark matter carefully, because I have confirmed that the Nanji Changshan may have stayed here all the time, and it has not gone anywhere. Nanling understood what Lady Nanji meant immediately after hearing this. If the abnormality here was the reason why the Nanji Changshan was silent, then they really had to be careful, otherwise it would be bad to repeat the same mistake. They all stopped talking at the same time. This was to evaluate how they should conduct the research. Nanling's mind moved, and suddenly he controlled the surrounding situation with gaseous perception, and then used the talent of flowing wind to instantly shrink and gather the matter in the entire range. With gaseous perception and flowing wind, he could at least avoid being affected by such particles within his perception range. The captured matter gathered into a small ball and fell into his palm, and a small ball with a faint glow appeared in his palm. This light was very strange. It was obviously pitch black, but in the pitch black it seemed to be shining with some other light, which was very mysterious and magical. Mo said, it seems that the research should not be difficult. This kind of matter can be restrained by spiritual power. Lady Nanji said, we still have to be more vigilant, and even stay away from this star field temporarily. I have a bad feeling. She seemed to be touched. Everyone followed suit, and they all returned to the purple iris, and then sailed away. The purple iris left this star field, because there was no suitable celestial body as a gravitational slingshot, so they spent some time. However, in the process of leaving, they encountered some unexpected things. The first person to have an accident was a female crew member. This female crew member was a peripheral subordinate of the dating organization developed by Lady Nanji. Her roommate suddenly reported to Lady Nanji in panic, saying that the female crew member suddenly fell asleep and seemed to be in a very terrible nightmare, and seemed to be struggling. Lady Nanji, Nan Lin, and Mo hurried over, and found that the female crew member had suffocated. It seemed that a pair of hands tightly strangled her throat, making her unable to breathe at all. The blood oxygen concentration began to drop, and she was going to suffocate to death. An urgent voice came from the side. Give her oxygen immediately. It's too late, her blood oxygen concentration is rapidly decreasing, and the problem is that she doesn't want to breathe, her lungs are against her breathing instinct. The crew member responsible for emergency rescue on the ship showed anxiety. The heart stopped beating, she's going to die. But in the next moment, wait, her blood oxygen concentration has recovered? That's not right, she has obviously stopped breathing and her heart has stopped beating. Nanling didn't want to respond to other people's surprise at this time, he just used the warm wind technique to forcibly hold the person. But this obviously can't last long, after all, if the blood circulation stops for a long time, it will still kill people. He said, Mo, give her an electric shock to stimulate her heart to beat again. Mo immediately understood what he meant when he heard it, and then stretched out his hand and gently pressed the chest of the female crew member, and then a flash of lightning, bang. Plop plop plop, the heart resumed beating. Then the female crew member was pulled back from the brink of death. She took a deep breath to regain her breath, and then her eyes widened as if she had seen something very terrifying. They are coming. She screamed in fear. She seemed to have seen something terrible in that nightmare. Chapter 168. Essence enters the brain, the secrets of the human body. The female crew member had a nightmare. In the nightmare, she was chased by a group of dead people. In the end, she was caught up and strangled. She dreamed that she was dead, and she thought she was dead, so when she woke up, she was still a little confused. This state is really creepy, especially after everyone read her brainwaves and restored her previous dream to a limited extent. Because she dreamed that she was killed, she really couldn't breathe. What's going on? Fortunately, the person was rescued, but the female crew member might not want to sleep for a while. At this time, Nanling's gaseous perception made another discovery. Previously, because she was attracted by this female crew member, she didn't care. Now she felt it and found that there seemed to be some unknown elements in the cabin. It seems that the energy shield of the spacecraft is completely unable to resist this substance. Nanling thought about it, and immediately used gaseous perception to gather these unknown particles as much as possible. I don't know if it's an illusion. When he took away these unknown particles, it seemed that everyone present was relieved. It seems that this kind of thing will also have a significant impact on the human body. It can even be determined that this unknown particle caused the abnormality of this female crew member. Nanling said, I will collect all these particles on the ship first, and then trouble you, sister, to do the final cleanup. I have judged before. At least after they were upgraded to photons by you, I didn't find anything else in my gaseous perception. Mo nodded and said, okay, I will cooperate with your work. This kind of thing is pervasive and it is indeed a bit troublesome. But since it can be observed so easily, it should not be as difficult to study as inert protons. Mrs. Nanji said, oh? Inert protons? It seems that your experience is also very exciting. Nanling shook his head and said, it's just that we have gained something in the previous expedition. By the way, let's find a place to stay now. This kind of research may not be a short time. He changed the subject. Even if Mrs. Nanji might really be his biological mother, so what? He promised to keep it a secret for Boss Fanny and he would not break his promise. Lady Nanji didn't care. A light screen flashed before her eyes, and then she raised her hand. Let's go here. There is a small star system here, where we can stay temporarily. Nanling nodded, and then adjusted the direction of navigation to that star system. It's just that because there are no large stars around, it will take them about a month to reach that star system. It's impossible to make a hyperspace jump, and this kind of interstellar navigation is really very laborious. But there is no way, the size of this purple iris is not enough, and it is far less comfortable to use than the top hunting ship like the Burning Cloud. During this voyage, Nanling has been studying the unknown particles he collected. Because he had the experience of studying inert protons, the first thing he thought of was optical observation. It's just a pity that this kind of particle is not carried by protons, its size is smaller, and it seems that there is no mass at all. However, Nanling didn't care too much about this kind of thing. After all, since it is dark matter, it is not so easy to find. In contrast, spiritual power seems to be naturally sensitive to this kind of thing. So what about divine thoughts? Nanling thought of this and tried to use his mind to study the unknown particles that he had collected with the wind technique. When his mind scanned, something went wrong. He seemed to have suddenly touched a very scary situation. The scene in front of him was grey and gloomy, and everything he saw and knew seemed to have lost its substance, as if it was in an illusion. His mental level suddenly became very depressed, as if a pair of hands suddenly grabbed his head and wanted to pull him into this void. At this moment, his body suddenly twitched. Then his body flew away in an instant, and his mind was pulled out of the dangerous situation. He covered his forehead and came back to his senses with some fatigue. He looked up and saw Mo standing in front of him with a stern face. She said angrily, "Don't use your mind to easily explore something you don't know. It's very dangerous, very, very dangerous." She reiterated the danger again and again, showing that she was very worried about Nanling's condition. Nanling's lips turned pale and his face looked bad. He said fluently, "I know. I was indeed careless just now." He had to admit that it was right to use various scientific methods to explore unknown things in this era. It was really easy to go wrong to exploit divine thoughts directly. Nanling felt that there seemed to be a group of gloomy things in his mind at this time. Looking at the group of unknown particles trapped by the wind technique before, it turned out to be much less. In other words, those unknown substances just ran into his brain along his divine thoughts. Nanling was shocked, but what could he do with his brain? Divine thoughts. That was crawling into his brain along his divine thoughts. Spiritual power. What a joke! If spiritual power entered his brain, it would probably be a precise explosion. In this case, the only thing he could think of was his own essence. Nanling carefully transferred the essence into his brain, which was something he never dared to do before. Even if he used spiritual power and essence to strengthen his own cells, he would deliberately bypass the brain. After all, if other parts of the body are damaged, they can still regenerate, but if the brain is damaged, then the person will be gone. Fortunately, the essence is indeed an important force in his body, and the essence entering the brain itself will not cause him any bad situation. And the moment the essence entered the brain, he felt that his brain became extremely active. The whole thinking became extremely agile, and his thoughts and ideas were all-encompassing in an instant. More importantly, his ancestral orifice between the eyebrows was also hot, as if it was nourished by the essence. At this moment, the strange particles that had originally occupied his head were all dispersed, and he himself entered an indescribable state of perception. He seemed to see many unknown things, and the world seemed bizarre in front of him. This time he was a little dizzy, and then he felt weak. It turned out that the essence was consumed too much. "How are you?" Mo asked with concern. Nanling looked up and unexpectedly saw a faint warm light emanating from Mo's body. The light was very beautiful, quietly shining on the surroundings and on him. He rubbed his eyes and thought he was dazzled. When he opened his eyes again, he found that the light was still there, but it was much fainter. Accompanying Mo's concerned expression, he could feel that she really cared about him. "How do you feel?" As he said that, he stretched out his hand and waved it in front of Nanling, as if to check if there was any problem with his eyesight. Nanling grabbed her hand and said, "I'm fine." Mo trembled all over, then pulled out her hand and stood up and walked away, saying, "If you're fine, it's fine. Why are you touching me?" It seemed that she was angry, but Nanling blinked and saw that the light on Mo's body turned into a pink feeling, as if she was not really that angry. The essence entered his brain, and unexpectedly brought him some unusual abilities. However, his essence was also severely depleted, and that special condition seemed to be rapidly weakening. It should be that he had not strengthened his brain enough. But no matter what, he felt more and more interesting. The human body is a secret treasure, and he is now opening this secret treasure bit by bit. Chapter 169. Foundation Building. Nanling was temporarily deprived of the right to study the unknown particle because Mo thought he was too naughty. But he didn't feel bad because he could still study himself. The strange vision he saw with his eyes before really disappeared quickly, but he was not willing to give up. After recovering from a lot of eating and exercise, he immediately started to try again. He once again let the essence to rise all the way into his brain, and the feeling of growing a brain appeared again. His mind suddenly became extremely active, and even the 5 internal organs of his body became active. This time he clearly felt that the information his brain could receive in this active state was also increasing. He hurriedly glanced at Mo again and found that Mo, who was working hard, was emitting a pure and bright white light, which was very beautiful and gave people a pure and focused feeling. He stepped forward and shouted with a smile. "Sister!" The light immediately turned into a dark yellow, which was a feeling of discomfort. Then it turned into a light pink, as if a little shy. Nanling's eyes lit up and found that this seemed very interesting. Could it be that he saw the emotional spectrum? So before Mo asked, he ran away. After all, he didn't know how long this situation could last, so he had to watch it while the effect was still there. Mo turned around and was about to say something, but she became a little furious. Where was the bastard who had teased her just now? Nanling had slipped away. He first ran to Lady Nanji. He found that there was no light on Lady Nanji's body, as if she had no thoughts at all. Could it be that his ability had expired again? Turning his head to look at Tai Long, who was recovering from a serious injury on the other side of the bridge, there was a sad grey light on his body. It seemed that his ability was still there, but he couldn't see Lady Nanji's emotions. She had excellent control over her mind. Nanling pondered for a while, and then suddenly shouted, "Mom!" At this moment, he saw Lady Nanji's face startled, and then a happy pink appeared on her body. Nanling got what he wanted and ran away. He wanted to find other colors. This was too fun. Lady Nanji looked at the place where Nanling ran out speechlessly, with a little gnashing of teeth in helplessness. This bastard who teased people randomly. So Nanling spent a week trying to enter this state of emotional observation. He slowly summarized the colors of emotions and knew that when people are frightened or nervous, their body color will be black. When they are depressed, it is gray. When they are angry, it is red. He was chased by Mo, who was full of red light, all the way, so this is still certain. Generally speaking, positive emotions are in the 4 colors of yellow, orange, red, and pink. Yes, Mo looks good even when angry, so that is also a positive color. Green, cyan, blue, and purple are more inclined to calm, intellectual, tough, and mysterious personality directions. White represents concentration and purity, and brown represents stability and practicality. and the colors are divided into bright and dark. Bright ones represent that this emotion is positive, while dark ones are negative. Let's take Mo as an example. When she is angry, her red is slightly darker, which means she wants to beat someone up. If this red is bright, it means a lively and excited emotional state, which is positive. But if it is darker, it means it has destructive attributes and is a murderous intention. This ability is quite interesting to Nan Lin, but it is just for fun. After all, the observer only needs to put on combat armor and he can't sense anything else. What he sees is just some manifestations of the human body's magnetic field. But in these plays, Nan Lin's brain has been greatly transformed. In order to maintain this state, he even let his essence flow in the Ren and the meridians, and let the essence circulate between the head and the dantian with the momentum of the small salutian. In this way, his brain becomes stronger and stronger, and even with the improvement of his mental state, even his mind becomes stronger and stronger. Later, he realized that this should also be a correct way of cultivation, using essence to nourish the brain, thereby strengthening the mind and warming the soul. In this process, there will naturally be a loss of essence, but as long as he continues to replenish the body's consumption, his essence will naturally continue to grow. At the same time, when he connected the 5 internal organs with the brain through the circulation of essence, the key of the internal organs and the brain were connected, so that his strengthening of the internal organs also led to the strengthening of the brain. This feeling was very mysterious, allowing Nan Lin to clearly feel every part of his body being strengthened. Even the improvement of his brain's thinking ability allowed him to easily find that there seemed to be something wrong with the 9 rune arrays left when he built his foundation. It's not that this foundation building method is wrong, but after all, it is a popular style. He thinks it can be slightly changed to be more suitable for his physical condition. So he did it. This is incredible. Can the completed foundation be changed? But he really did it, because his mind can easily control whether it is changing the plan or the operation of spiritual power. Originally, if ordinary people change the spiritual array that has already completed the foundation, the spiritual power accumulated in the spiritual array will pour out like a dam bursting, so that the foundation is completely damaged and all previous efforts are wasted. But these spiritual powers are very obedient unto Nan Lin's will, and there is no such thing as pouring out. Suppression, comprehensive suppression. Nan Lin's control over the spiritual power in his body has reached an extreme. He even felt that he didn't need this kind of foundation building spiritual formation at all. He only needed to accumulate spiritual power in his body in a similar way. When the spiritual power reached a certain level, he could naturally form a pill. He suddenly found that there was no secret in his eyes for this stage of practice. Although he could practice step by step before, forming a pill was definitely not a problem. But now he is no longer satisfied with the step-by-step practice. He thinks he can play some tricks. For example, add a few more foundation building spiritual formations, or add a few more layers to the original 10-layer foundation building practice. Anyway, there are a lot of ideas. And it's not the kind of unrealistic fantasy, but a full-fledged inference after having enough understanding of his body and wind spiritual power. He really did it. After he modified the 9 foundation building formations he had completed to suit himself, he added another spiritual formation to himself. In other words, he now has 10 foundation building spiritual formations. It's very simple. Because he found that there were only 2 things that prevented him from adding this spiritual array. One was his understanding of wind, and the other was that he had to avoid interference from the spiritual power emitted from other spiritual arrays. Now these 2 items are not a problem for him, so naturally there is no difficulty. But in fact, Nan Lin felt that this was not a difficult thing in itself. After all, if you want to complete the foundation building, this is the only way. He just advanced this process. In other words, he now has no bottleneck to complete the foundation building, and he can just rush all the way. Chapter 170. World-destroying matter. While Nan Lin was struggling, the purple iris finally docked at that star system for rest. The star in this star system is very small, and it is obvious that there was not much matter when it was formed, because the accompanying planet is only a lonely rocky planet. To be honest, this rocky planet should even be excluded from the ranks of planets, and it can be called an asteroid. Fortunately, as long as there is a star system, no matter how big or small, the matter in a star system is always enough for the purple iris to use. The purple iris also has a medium-sized fusion reactor on it. As long as the matter can be collected, it can produce all conventional materials. So the purple iris docked on a rocky planet with only 1/2 standard gravity to rest, collecting materials while conducting research. There are many crew members who can help this time. Anyway, Mo can concentrate on research without having to worry about other things. After another month, Mo finally walked out of the laboratory with a confident expression. I already understand the characteristics of this thing. After the voice fell, she took out a stone. This stone is just something I picked up randomly on this planet. The recorded mass at the time was 1.31 kilograms. And now, after radiating it with virtual matter for 20 days, only 0.77 kilograms is left. It has lost 41% of its mass without any change in its appearance and structure. Nanling asked. Virtual matter? Mo said. This is the name I gave to the dark matter we observed. It does not exist in the form of particles, but more like an invisible force like spiritual power. And it will continue to grab physical matter and transform its form of existence. We have also seen the result of the transformation. The mass of this stone has decreased, but other physical properties have not changed. Nanling asked. So what changes will happen after the virtual matter grabs the matter? Mo said. This is the magic. The matter infected by the virtual matter will produce the same mass while losing mass, radiating around in the form of elementary particles. Nanling found a problem. Then what about the original matter? What will happen to the matter that has lost mass? Mo said. Maybe it will disappear directly. Oh, Lady Nanji suddenly said in a faint voice. Or become a ghost. Everyone was shocked, because Mrs. Nanji just seemed to be a different person. Everyone looked over and saw that she was sweating and said, I seem to remember something, but it's not clear enough. She seemed to find it ridiculous and never mentioned the word ghost. But Nanling couldn't help but take it to heart. He asked, do you know how to deal with those ghosts? Madame Nanji smiled bitterly and shook her head and said, I don't know. She then looked at Mo and said, do you have a way to prevent the erosion of this virtual matter? Mo nodded and said, yes, I have designed an instrument that uses the fact that virtual matter can be empowered to jump. As long as we create a large enough empowering magnetic field, we can resist the erosion of this virtual matter. Madame Nanji took a deep breath and nodded and said, then let's do it. Nanling said, if that's all, isn't it enough preparation? Madame Nanji shook her head and said, it's enough. You also know that this kind of power is similar to the properties of spiritual power to some extent, and spiritual power can be used to limit and restrain it. Besides, I feel my mission. I came here with a mission, and so do you, my child. Nanling was stunned, wondering why Madame Nanji's tone suddenly became so heavy. Then he suddenly thought of something and said, you mean, the existence of this virtual substance is related to the Antarctic Changshen? Madame Nanji nodded. Everyone was speechless for a moment. Mo broke the silence. Speaking of which, I have always had a doubt. That is, since this virtual substance will jump to a higher level and produce new matter after encountering a real entity, then these virtual substances existing in that star field should disappear sooner or later in theory. Madame Nanji said, that's the problem. It is expanding rapidly. It has a source. We must shut down this source, otherwise everything in the current world will become a shadow of the past, and the matter of the entire universe will return to its most primitive form and start over. Nanling's scalp tingled after hearing this. He said, why does this sound like a weapon that completely restarts the world? Mo also nodded carefully and said, just like the Nether Locust, it is a weapon that restarts all life. They all had a strange feeling in their hearts. This era, this world, is really full of traces of human intervention. When they asked more questions, Madame Nanji became a little confused again, and did not trigger any other memories. Helpless, it seems that they have to board the immortal ship at least once, hoping to find the memory of Lady Nanji there and find the answer for everyone. It was under such circumstances that Nanling and Mo worked overtime together. They tried their best to add an empowering magnetic field to the purple iris. This was not a small project, and its complexity was beyond imagination. Fortunately, they got 2 folding cargo boxes at the previous supply station of the Immortal Society, one of which was food, and the other was filled with various high-precision mechanical parts. It was precisely because of these parts that the empowering magnetic field designed by Mo could finally reach the expected power. It was also one of Mo's talents to design instruments with existing parts. And Nanling also provided great help in this process. If Nanling could only help Mo in doing such things in the past, now he can share a large part of the work for Mo. Even if it was just some work with a lower technical content. But this has already reflected Nanling's progress. His thinking ability has improved by leaps and bounds, and even Mo was surprised by the speed of his thoughts. Looking at your condition, I can't help but want to try the essence into the brain. Nanling asked curiously. Why not? She lifted one side of her bangs, revealing a piece of metal implanted on her smooth forehead and said, because of it. Because of my family's inheritance, I still made some modifications to my head. This implanted component can help me better control the magnetic field. This is also the key to my ability to easily break through the 8th level of foundation building and now reach the perfection of foundation building. And if I want to practice the essence into the brain, I'm afraid that it will have a serious rejection reaction, and eventually cause some unpredictable effects. Nanling could only say with regret after hearing this. This may be the sadness of this era. Even the path of cultivation has been integrated with too many technological elements, making it impossible for the original practice method to continue. Mo patted his shoulder and said, don't worry about me. In fact, this component itself has been amplifying my thinking ability. The effect may not be worse than your essence entering the brain. Originally, after we returned to the ancient domain, I was thinking about whether to take you to do such a transformation. As a result, now you have your own way. This is great. Hearing this, Nanling showed a helpless smile and said, well, it turns out that I just caught up with my sister's footsteps. It seems that I have always been a chaser. Mo sighed helplessly. Chasers like you make me feel very stressed. Chapter 171. Too rigorous. It took them another month to finally complete the empowerment device. This is a device specifically for virtual matter, and it has only disadvantages and no benefits for other aspects. Anyway, when the instrument was put into trial operation, everyone on the ship had a big hair. This is a helpless thing. After all, this is actually a strong magnetic field, which makes people and things on the whole ship full of static electricity. Nanling is no exception. His hair stood up, and the hair on his body stood up, but he was surprised to see Sister Mo, who was still black and straight. Then he realized that Mo was the master of electromagnetics, so how could she be affected by this magnetic field? More unexpected was Lady Nanji, who was not affected at all, especially Nanling did not feel any spiritual power fluctuations from her. How did she do it? Nanling did not understand this. He felt that his aunt had at least a golden elixir in her cultivation, right? But there was no spiritual power fluctuation at all. Could it be a golden elixir that was good at hiding? He guessed. In this case, Mo took out some of the remaining virtual matter and exposed it directly to the air. Then the virtual matter suddenly turned into a brilliant light, which suddenly became bright and then disappeared. It has completed the jump, Mo said confidently. Nanling nodded and said, then the conditions are in place, and the next step is exploration. But I think we still need to make some miniaturized equipment. Mo affirmed. Of course, but we have a lot of spare parts, and we can do this in the remaining time. But at this moment, Mrs. Nanji suddenly said, what do you think, if we use these virtual matters to change the nature of this spacecraft and reduce its own mass, can we increase the speed of navigation and reduce the energy consumption required for acceleration? As she spoke, she suddenly became absent-minded and said, if so, can we really reach the speed of light one day? She made a very bold guess. Nanling and Mo looked at each other, because according to the mass-energy equation, if an object is to be accelerated to the speed of light, it means that the mass of the object will reach infinity. This is simply impossible to achieve in theory. And the virtual matter in front of them can make the mass of an object disappear, so doesn't it solve this problem perfectly? But things are definitely not that simple. Nanling even thought that the Nanji Changshan might have destroyed itself because of researching this kind of thing. Just as this thought was turning over in Nanling's mind, Mo had already said with the same vigilance. This topic is too big, it's not something we should consider now. She obviously had the same concerns as Nanling. Mrs. Nanji came back to her senses and said, don't worry, I just suddenly felt something. Even if we really want to study it, this kind of topic is not for non-professionals like us to do. Everyone thought it made sense. Although Mo had scientific research capabilities, he could only conduct basic research. More in-depth excavation still required professionals. At this time, they set off again. The purple iris, which had been replenished with materials, quickly took off from the desolate planet, and then arrived at the previous void after a short hyperspace flight. To be honest, before entering this void, everyone felt a little anxious, not knowing what kind of things they would encounter in this dark airspace. But when they really came here again, they were amazed by the scene in front of them. With the purple iris as the center, the entire spaceship was surrounded by a brilliant array of colors. The ship really looked like a colorful flower blooming in the void, dazzling people. Many crew members even forgot the danger here and came to the deck to enjoy the beautiful scenery. In fact, this is the scene of the virtual matter around the purple iris being continuously transformed into photons. And the appearance of this scene at least means that Mo and Nanling's creation is successful. Nanling asked with concern, "How is the system load?" Ever since he was tricked by his unlucky intelligence core, he now asks about the load before seeing anything, and has a fear of insufficient load. Mo squinted at him slightly in annoyance, and then said, "The current load is only 1%, or it is because it can only display 1%. I listened to your requirements carefully and made system redundancy." Nanling nodded and said, "That's good, but for the sake of insurance, I also made another set of the same. I just hope it won't be used." Mo's eyebrows were about to stand up. Isn't this too much? The helpless situation is that the materials used by Nanling theoretically belong to his property, which is inherited from the Changsheng society by his bloodliner. So how to use them is his business, and he can use them in any way he wants to find the Namji Changsheng. In this case, even Mrs. Nanji showed a helpless look. She said, "These two sets of equipment have almost used up half of the materials, right?" Nanling said, "For this expedition, I have almost used up all the materials." Mrs. Nanji looked at Nanling and asked, "What did you use?" Nanling said, "I mainly used them to make spiritual weapons and miniaturized empowerment devices to cooperate with our actions. These are all necessary." He talked about his preparations one by one, and Mrs. Nanji's expression became more and more strange. She said, "How did you develop this overly prepared character? I remember that most of the characters of the Feather Guards are set to be loyal, rigorous and brave. How did you become like this?" Nanling thought for a moment, and then said seriously, "I think I am still very loyal." Mo and Madame Nanji nodded in agreement. They both had to admit that Nanling's credibility and openness were their favorite points. Then Nanling said, "I just think in the most rigorous way and think that these are things that need to be prepared." Mo and Madame Nanji raised their eyebrows. He actually called this rigorous? Well, let's call it that, but it is also overly rigorous. Nanling said again, "As for bravery, I may not be brave enough." Mo sighed and said, "You're brave, there is no doubt about that. I knew it when you drove the Juoxia alone to face an entire fleet of raiders." Madame Nanji also sighed. "Do you know how shocked I was when I learned that you escaped from that mining planet in that way and triggered the entire Chinyuano 6 purge?" She shook her head and sighed. "Well, loyal, rigorous, and brave, you're indeed a natural feather guard. No, you're a well-deserved feather general." Nanling was a little embarrassed by the praise. Anyway, he felt that in the eyes of people who like him, such good qualities can always be put on even if they are forced. He looked at Mo, whose eyes were shining with pink light but still pretending to be very cold, and his heart was full of smiles. This ability is really cheating. Chapter 172. My mom is such a scumbag. The purple iris was advancing in this darkness filled with virtual matter. The further it advanced, the brighter the halo on its body became. "How much is the load?" Nanlin, who had a fear of underload, asked again. Mo took a look and said, 30%, which is a bit bad. She had to think that Nanling's previous preparation was correct. If he hadn't insisted on doubling the rated load, the current value would be 60%, and the danger and probability of failure of this expedition would have greatly increased. As they went deeper into this virtual airspace, the magnetic field energy of the empowering device had to increase its intensity and load. The density of the virtual matter had become too high. Nanling was not in a good mood. He said, "This situation is not good. Could it be that the Antarctic eternal life is at the source of this virtual matter? No, I have to debug the spare unit again. It looks like it will be used at any time." Mo couldn't help rolling his eyes when he saw this. Good guy, so cowardly. Well, this is called overly cautious. But who let this be Nanlin? Mo could only debug the equipment with Nanlin, and by the way, think about whether the two units can be connected in parallel. After all, judging from the working status of the current enabling device, I'm afraid that the load will be increased to more than 80% in 2 or 3 days. Mo, who designed this instrument himself, knows very well that when the load is below 80%, it can run normally for a long time. But once the load is increased to more than 80%, its service life will be greatly reduced, and the failure rate will also increase sharply. In other words, 80% is actually a very important threshold. If another device can be connected in parallel, then this value can be reduced to a relatively safe range. This is even more stable than using 2 devices in turn. After some operation, they finally started the second device when the load of the first device reached 70%. With the two connected in parallel, the load rate of this set of equipment was instantly reduced to 30%. Well, as for why it is 30% instead of 35%, it is because Nanling still has some load modules. It was not enough to make another one, but taking this opportunity to use it can increase the total load of this combined device. When the equipment was running, Mo felt that his anxiety was relieved, and it could be used for a long time. But when she looked at Nanling, she found that his brows were furrowed even more. She asked, "What's wrong again?" Nanling said worriedly, "From now on, we have no backup equipment." Mo. As expected, he was rigorous. The perspective of thinking was different, and the things he saw were completely different. Anyway, for Nanling, what he saw was that he and others were very dangerous now. Madame Nanji couldn't bear it anymore. She said, "Don't worry. The operation of the equipment can be confirmed through daily inspections. As long as the operation of the enabling device is monitored in real time to ensure that there are no hidden dangers of failure, then theoretically this equipment can continue to operate." Nanling's face also looked better after hearing this and said, "That's right, but I still suggest that you prepare for evacuation when the current load rises to 40%. After all, in this case, even if one set of equipment breaks down, there is still another set that can operate at nearly full capacity for a period of time." That rigorous look really made people laugh and cry. But it is undeniable that the way he took everything into consideration actually makes people feel safe. Lady Nanji could only agree. I know, as if perfunctory. They continued to move forward. In this airspace covered by the void, the purple iris gradually became brighter than a burning star. This was because the transition photons around it were becoming more and more dense. At the same time, it also put more and more pressure on the empowerment device on the purple iris. At first glance, the value was 43%, which was actually very stable. But Nanling was already panicking, feeling that this value was too dangerous. But he never thought that his own mother was actually a scumbag. When he was at 38%, he had been constantly persuading Lady Nanji to prepare for evacuation. As a result, she kept using words like "let's see, there are still 2%, there are still 1%, it's just reached 40%, no rush, etc." to prevaricate. But Nanling was very anxious. He could see that Lady Nanji would not give up easily. To be honest, this feeling of insecurity without a backup plan made him very uncomfortable. But in this case, he could only slow down his thinking and turn to self-protection preparations. He also wore pure color faith on the ship. Pure faith alone cannot stop the virtual substance, but the wind shield technique driven by pure faith can. When Nanling operates the wind shield technique, it can expel the surrounding virtual substance. After all, what Nanling wants to do is to expel rather than deal with it. These are two completely different ideas. If Nanling did not know how to make a device to drive the wind technique, I'm afraid that the one that is used on the purple iris should be an amplified version of the wind escape technique. The production of spiritual tools is an aspect that Nanling is completely lacking. Even if he wants to learn, he cannot get complete information. If he explores on his own, he can only do maintenance work at most. If he really wants to learn systematically, he may really have to find a higher education institution. In this way, the worst situation that Nanling was worried about did not happen. When the load of the enabling unit on the purple iris reached 47%, they finally saw the target. It was a huge spaceship floating in the dark deep sky with an extremely calm posture. The size of this spaceship can even be compared with a planet. This is the Antarctic Immortal ship, the legendary Immortal ship. But at this time, this immortal boat was looming, as if it was a phantom that only existed in the darkness, which made people feel weird. Once the purple iris approached, it seemed to have crossed a certain limit, and the load rate of the enabling unit would rise sharply, and the situation was once very critical. Fortunately, Mrs. Nanji did not hesitate. She finally ordered the spacecraft to retrieve to a relatively safe area, and then said to Nanling and Mo, "Next, we will go up by ourselves. Xiaonan, you just need to open the door of the immortal boat for me," and Mo shook her head and said, "Let's go together." Mrs. Nanji was surprised. As a result, she heard Nanling say, "Since we are here, there is no reason not to go in and take a look. I also want to see where I was born." Nanling turned her head and looked at Mo and said, "Sister, can you stay behind?" Mo still shook her head and said, "You need me. I believe my ability will be useful in this immortal boat." Her electromagnetic control is indeed theoretically very effective for all scientific and technological equipment. But the Nanji Changsheng in front of her seems to be a little different. But Mo is very persistent. Nanling could see that the aura on her body was a calm and firm light blue. He looked at Mo seriously and suddenly said, "Thank you." He could see that the light blue on Mo's body suddenly showed some light pink. But her face was still cold and she said, "Don't thank me, I'm just very curious about this situation. What's more, Master Gye Chen also wants to know the details here, I must get first-hand information." Nanling looked at Mo with love, and thought that her hypocritical look was so cute. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 173 The Dark Thing. The final candidates for the attack were Lady Nanji, Mo, and Nanlin. They would enter Nanji Changshan in the Wailing wingsuit, while Tai Long would stay on the Purple Iris. There was nothing they could do about it. After all, Tai Long was too weak. Although they didn't want to admit this fact, Tai Long didn't even have the ability to protect himself after leaving the Purple Iris. This was the reality. When Nanling and the other two left the light curtain of the Purple Iris, the small power-enabling devices they carried suddenly operated at full power. It was obvious that this small device was simply unable to resist the terrible erosion of the virtual substance outside. As a last resort, Nanling immediately performed the wind shield technique and wrapped himself in a layer of wind spiritual power shield. The flowing wind disturbed the virtual substance and took it away from him, so that he himself would be unhindered. The only thing he had to pay was the divine consciousness to control this wind shield. Even the spiritual power was continuously supplied from the spiritual furnace, and he didn't need to pay any price. Mo's body suddenly burst into a strong light, which made her look like a goddess under the aurora. The empowerment device was useless to Nanlin, but she could still use it, and she could use it without any pressure. As for Lady Nanji, it was a bit strange. She also used wind magic to defend herself, but there was no spiritual power fluctuation on her body. The virtual substance just rotated around her like airflow and then dispersed, and did not invade her body. This looked very strange, as if she directly controlled the virtual substance. Nanling looked at Lady Nanji strangely, wanting to ask something, but finally shook her head and did not ask. Lady Nanji's mind was not on herself at all at this time, but activated the wingsuit propulsion and flew to the gate of the Nanji Changshan. They were as small as dust in front of the huge Nanji Changshan. Only when they got close did Nanling realize that the Nanji Changshan, which looked a little blurry and unreal from a distance, suddenly became real. In front of him at this time was a huge gate that was more than 1,000 meters high. This was where various ships of the Nanji Changshan usually came and went, but now it was completely closed and seemed very peaceful. Nanling and the other two paused in front of the huge portal, and then Nanling sent a message. "General Lingyu Nanlin, please enter." Silence, a not long but very difficult silence. The next moment, the portal that seemed to be unable to open forever slowly opened a gap. "Admit, respected General Lingyu, Changshan is at your service." Nanling was surprised. He didn't expect that the intelligent program on this ship was quite normal. They looked at each other and then Nanling flew in first. The Welling wingsuit was fully unfolded, which was the most flexible and maneuverable state, suitable for dealing with all situations. The three of them slowly passed through the portal in a Chinese character, and at this moment the portal slowly closed. Nanling frowned and habitually said in a rigorous manner, "Can the door remain open?" "As you wish, General." Then the portal did not continue to close, but remained open. Nanling realized one thing: General Lingyu did have a very high authority on the Antarctic Changshan. They cruised forward cautiously, but everything around them was quiet, without any sound, and the silence was suffocating. Everyone moved forward silently until the end of this long starship channel, where a port appeared. Lady Nanji sighed faintly. "I remember it. I got off the ship here that year, and came to this place full of longing and expectation. Strange, why did I think at the time to save my life and shed my blood for the Changshan Society? Obviously, I should have been the Rose Lady of the Dai Ting organization at the time." Her memory seemed to be confused. It should be said that the content of the memory did not match the content of her cognitive speculation. Nanling was of no help in this situation. Instead, Mo pondered for a while and said, "Is it possible that you have lost or sealed your memory once in order to enter the Changshan Society?" Lady Nanji said with resistance, "How could I torment myself like this? It is the most dangerous thing to tamper with my own memory." Nanling said, "Okay, let's talk about this separately. Speaking of which, what should we do next?" Lady Nanji asked. Can't you make the AI here immortal? Ask it what happened here first. Nanling did as he was told. But Changsheng's answer was very interesting. I'm sorry, General. According to the highest instructions of the Immortal Lord, all information in the Antarctic Changsheng must be obtained from the corresponding level of the terminal, and cannot be obtained directly from me. Nanling was stunned for a moment, and then realized that this should be the confidentiality system on this ship. He said, "Then what kind of help can you provide me?" Changsheng. If the General wants to go somewhere, I can arrange a navigator for the General. I can also warn the General to avoid being harassed by those unseen things wandering inside the ship. Nanling was silent. Unseen things refer to things that are unwilling to stop even if they die. What exactly are they? At this time, most tapped his arm lightly and pointed forward. Nanling saw that there were guards standing with guns on the dock where the ship was docked. They were wearing military uniforms with gorgeous patterns, and each of them had a standard spirit furnace flashing on their chest, and the wisdom core embedded in their eyebrows was shining. But there was only one problem: they all looked black and white. They couldn't even see the three people flying in the distance, just standing there quietly without moving. Madame Nanji was in a trance and said, "This is the Feather Guard, they should not be living people." She made this judgment. Indeed, based on their research on things like virtual matter, it only takes 40 to 50 days to expose to virtual matter radiation, and things that originally had entities will completely lose their entities and become nothingness. And here, the entire Nanji Changsheng is full of virtual matter. In other words, there are no living people here, and all they have are nothingness that has been corroded by virtual matter. Nanling said, "This is probably what Changsheng said at things that don't sleep." He thought for a while and said, "What's wrong with these feather guards? Will they still listen to my orders?" Changsheng said, "They have become things that don't sleep, but a remnant of the former feather guards left in this world. The real them have long lost the definition of existence. You are the only feather guard, General." Nanling also felt cold hands and feet after hearing this. Then he asked, "What about you? You should have been eroded and lost the basis of your existence, right?" Changsheng said, "As an intelligent program, the basis of my existence lies in data. Although my host has lost its materiality like these ethereal things, the data that carries me has always existed, so I still exist." Nanling knew that this was a very high-level AI, because it could think about its own existence and had no doubt about its own existence. Then he asked, "Can I take action against these two feather guards? Will it trigger any alarm mechanism on the ship?" Changsheng said, "If it is the General's order, then of course it is possible. And please don't worry about triggering anything. The range of activities of these ethereal things is limited. Please try it." Nanling shared the news he had obtained with the people around him, and Madame Nanji and Mo immediately took a fighting stance. For these ethereal things, they really need more information. P.S. It's Friday again, and I will give you more updates on the weekend. Chapter 174 Oil Guard. The three of them descended from the sky, landing 100 meters away from the two virtual feather guards. Even at this distance, they were still not discovered. Madame Nanji showed a lazy look at this time and said, "It looks like they are almost blind. If you want to try, you two can do it. I will take a rest for my old body." She is obviously young, beautiful, graceful and elegant, but she insists on describing herself as an old skeleton. It can be seen how lazy Madame Nanji is. Nanling can only move forward with Mo. They keep approaching, 80 meters, 70 meters, 60 meters, until they are 50 meters away. The two virtual feather guards suddenly raised their spears and took a fighting posture, and at the same time opened their mouths alertly and seemed to say something. Nanling and Mo stopped at the same time. But they couldn't hear what the two virtual feather guards said. But at this time, Madame Nanji behind them said, "They are saying, 'Who is there?'" Nanling turned around in surprise. Madame Nanji shrugged. "You can tell by looking at the lip reading. In fact, I can't hear it either." Nanling felt that he had more things to learn. However, he was reminded and suddenly mobilized a stream of energy to run in his ren and dim meridians. As the energy entered his brain, everything he saw changed. He saw that the two feather guards still had a faint aura. He felt that the surroundings were foggy, which seemed to be formed by the gathering of virtual matter. The virtual matter here was so dense that he could directly observe it with his energy entering his brain. The two virtual feather guards who still had a faint aura stood in this thick fog. Nanling didn't know why, he just felt that they seemed very lonely. So he tried to speak. "Are you okay?" But the next moment, the two feather guards' faces changed drastically, and then they opened their mouths and shouted silently, and then thrust their spears towards Nanling together. Madame Nanji yawned and said, "They think you were a monster. It seems that your voice sounds like a monster roaring in their ears." Mo said coldly, "Why do you seem to think that they still have wisdom? What I can feel is just a weak and incomplete electromagnetic wave, or the remnant of their brain waves, or the remnant of their thoughts in a more literary way." It was originally quite literary, but it was no longer literary after Mo said that. Nanling said speechlessly, "Okay, since the negotiation failed, let's test their weight." After the voice fell, he also drew out his spear, and then chose a feather guard to fight. As a result, his heart jumped on the spot during this battle, and he almost lost his hand. Because without the spiritual power apt, his collapsed spiritual spear was not able to touch the spear, and it almost let it go straight in. Then he quickly drove the spiritual power and blocked it with his backhanded spear, and it was considered to hit the entity and barely resisted it. At this moment, a long sword flashed like thunder from his side and struck him, knocking the long spear of the feather guard away almost at the same time, and then he took a defensive posture to block the spear attacking him. Mo turned his face to Nanlin, and his cold eyes seemed to penetrate from behind that visor. "Don't let your guard down," she warned, and then focused on dealing with her enemy. Nanling was embarrassed. He knew that he was indeed not so tired just now. He quickly cheered up, and then used the spear skills he learned to fight this virtual feather guard. Then the more he fought, the more surprised he was, because he found that in terms of spear skills alone, this seemingly ordinary feather guard was not worse than him. His spear skills were at the level of LV8, which means that this feather guard also had LV8 spear skills. This surprised him. Moreover, the spear skills used by the opponent were simple and clear, but there was a feeling of being refined and simple, which should be the exclusive spear skills of this feather guard. Nanling's wind contract is more focused on skills. Of course, he has also learned many other spear techniques, but the wind contract is still the main one. The two side spirit spears kept touching, and the wind spirit power splashed. Nanling found that the opponent was still able to call on the spirit power, but these spirit powers were stained with a dark color by the virtual substance. After the two sides touched, Nanling found that the opponent suddenly gathered the scattered spirit power, and then the spirit power gathered at the tip of the spear, and pierced through with a fierce gun. This is a bit like a killer move in the wind contract. It's just that the opponent's timing is not good, and at the same time, the spirit power concentration of the opponent's spear tip is still a little worse in Nanling's eyes. Now that his spirit has entered his brain, this kind of analysis and thinking is completed in his mind in an instant, and then the spear tip is just tilted upward lightly, and then it is extremely accurately pointed at the side of the opponent's spear tip, instantly breaking it at the weak point of its strength. In a flash, he showed his improved thinking ability, keen eyesight and reaction ability to the fullest. Then, with the force of rebound, the spear body returned to the direction facing the opponent's body. Then he held the end of the spear with his other hand and pushed hard, instantly unleashing a killer move from Wind Covenant called Wind Piercing Thrust. The wind spirit power gathered at the tip of the spear spun rapidly, exerting the ultimate spiral tearing force. His opponent swung his spear away, and at this time he could only watch the collapsed spirit spear spun rapidly and stabbed into his heart. The spiral tearing force even tore a big hole in his heart. Wait, something seems wrong. The big hole spread out uncontrollably, and then the body of the void feather guard also dissipated like a bubble. Nanling watched this scene, and suddenly heard a mix muttering in his ears. The fog is so thick around. How long do I have to stand guard here? The general asked us to stand guard here. When can we go back to rest? I'm so tired. Nanling's pupils shrank and he was in a trance. But he knew that his strengthened brain could hear some incredible sounds. So he thought for a moment and responded with his mind. In the name of General Ling Yu, I allow you to rest. General? Great, the voice disappeared like the wind. Nanling came back to his senses after a moment, and when he looked again, he found that he had won. Mo was still fighting. But Mo was obviously experimenting with this state of virtualized Ling Yu guard, and she obviously did not use her full strength. Nanling suddenly felt a sense of pity, so he also sent a message with his mind. In the name of General Ling Yu, you can rest. The next moment, the virtualized Ling Yu guard who was still fighting suddenly stopped, then put down the spear, and disappeared with a calm face like a bubble. This change surprised Mo very much, and Madame Nanji could not help but stand up carefully. She said, I didn't expect that they would also abide by their duties after becoming the undying creatures. It is worthy of the Ling Yu guard who engraved loyalty into their genes. Nanling felt depressed, and suddenly there was a heavy feeling pressing on his heart. He seemed to feel some responsibility, but he didn't want to admit it, because it was simply added to him for no reason. Chapter 175 confirmed to be the biological mother. After dealing with the two virtual feather guards, the three continued to move forward. The interior space of the Antarctic Changsheng is extremely large, and even this spaceship deliberately creates a feeling of an everyday city. The weather system maintains blue sky and white clouds, and the ground is completely open without the flatness and oppression of the interior cabin of the spaceship. They turned around the platform of the port and passed through the area where the cargo boxes were piled up, just like walking out of the port area on flat ground, and then entered a tree-lined park. It's just a pity that the trees in this park have also been virtualized, and even the birdsong and flowers that should have been here have lost their true appearance. Nanling tried to touch these things, and there was a sense of touch, but it was completely different from the real touch. It's a pity that he can't touch it with his fingers, otherwise this understanding would be more profound. And he didn't dare to explore it with his divine thoughts anymore, so he could only suppress the doubts in his heart and follow Madame Nanji. That's right, Madame Nanji seemed to have remembered something again, and was leading them in one direction. Along the way, they encountered the virtual feather guards, and basically, Nanling could disband them with just one word. Strictly speaking, these feather guards might be his brothers and sisters. But there was no way to deal with other unlighted things besides the feather guards. Although many virtual characters wearing researcher clothes had a range of only 20 to 30 meters, they also did not have the will of living people like the feather guards. They roared inexplicably and wanted to attack everything that appeared in their range of warning, and then were easily destroyed by Nanling or Mo. Even my lip reading can't interpret what they're shouting. It seems that they have no consciousness left. Nanling nodded secretly in his heart. Compared with the faint and dim spiritual light on the feather guards, these things actually have no spiritual light reaction at all. He said, I feel that it seems that the will of the feather guards is stronger, more focused and pure, so they can still have these fragments of consciousness left. Madame Nanji sighed softly. Who said it wasn't? Now think about it, you're actually very pure guys. Countless memories seem to emerge in front of her eyes. She said, come on, come this way. We'll reach the place where you were born in a little while. It's also the place that impressed me the most. Nanling followed in silence. Then they came to a towering building that looked like a church. Madame Nanji stopped and said, this is it. It's the new recruit camp of the Feather Guard. All the Feather Guards leave from here. It's also where I used to work. Mo looked at the silent Nanling and asked, have you recovered all your memories? Madame Nanji said, at least my memories on this immortal ship have almost recovered. I did give myself a lot of psychological hints when I left. When I came back here, these psychological hints took effect one after another, causing my memory to return quickly. Then she paused and said, speaking of which, I increasingly suspect that I may have tampered with my memory before entering the Nanji Changsheng. After all, I seem to be very good at this. And if I hadn't tampered with my memory in advance, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to pass the Changsheng Society's screening, right? Nanling thought this made sense, but at the same time, she felt even more strange. Madame Nanji came to find her past, and she found it, but this past was woven from her past before that. It was just like a nesting doll, absolutely amazing. The three of them quietly entered the new recruit camp of the Feather Guards. There were also many shadowy creatures here. These Feather Guards looked very young, some of them were only 7 or 8 years old. They looked like Nanling's classmates. What was surprising was that these creatures did not attack them, even if they deliberately approached them. It seemed that there was no concept of attack in their remaining consciousness. Madame Nanji sighed and said, these are indeed your classmates. They were born by special means. This operation will make them grow quickly to the size of a 16-year-old, and then they will begin to learn various knowledge and undergo strict training. In another 3 years, they can become qualified Feather Guards. Mo was stunned for a moment, and said with great pity in his heart, so, they are actually no different from babies now. No wonder they have no hostility towards us even if they have become immortal creatures. Nanling looked at the virtual boy who should be his real brother in silence, and the heavy feeling in his heart became even more. They did not disturb these wandering shadows because they could not do anything. Madame Nanji took them to a laboratory. When she stretched out her hand and knocked lightly on the door of the laboratory was opened. Then a voice of AI came from the door. Welcome back, Ms. Rose. Madame Nanji was in a trance for a moment, and then said, yes, my name is Rose, they used to call me Miss Rose. She seemed to remember something again. Nanling smiled and said, so I should call you Rose, Aunt Rose? Madame Nanji, no, Madame Rose said, okay, you can call me that now, because all my memories on this ship have returned. She said this, but she didn't seem very happy. Because obviously, this was not all her memories. Her journey to find her past was not over yet, and this Nanji Changsheng was just one of her stops. But she quickly put these aside, and then came to a petri dish and said, "Look, this is where I work, and you are cultivated here." Nan Lin, it was really the child made by Madame Rose herself. She said with emotion, "The feather guards are the most mature type of artificial warriors of the Changsheng society. They either wield the power of fire or the power of wind. Every feather guard that grows up is extremely powerful. In the history of the Antarctic Changsheng, the feather guard had a strength of thousands of people at its peak. It once produced a nascent soul-level feather general and 8 golden core-level feather marquises. What a terrible force is this?" Nan Ling said calmly. "But they are all a thing of the past now." Madame Rose said, "Yes, they are all over, and you're the only one left. And I also know what you are worried about. You are worried that there is a hidden danger in your body that you will be controlled by others, right?" Nan Ling nodded silently. This was the fact. Madame Rose said easily, "Then you can rest assured, because there are indeed hidden dangers in the original production process of the feather guards. The key lies in the filler gene when the two genes are fused. The genes you got are incomplete. If it was really a perfect immortal bloodliner, I'm afraid you would at least have reached the nascent soul stage now. All the feather guards have just gene fragments that have been screened and directionally adjusted. They need to be mixed with some gene information as filters to form a complete gene code. Unfortunately, there are problems with the gene information used for filling. It only takes some specific gene-targeted drugs to easily put your body into a weak state." Mo became nervous when she heard this. She asked, "What about Xiaonan? Does he have this problem too?" Madame Rose shook her head and said gently, "He is my most perfect work. I may have been in a prank mentality at the time. When I was mixing the child's genes, I had a sudden idea to fill in my own gene information as a carrier, so his genes do not have those defects." Nan Ling knew one thing. Madame Rose was indeed his biological mother. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.